Call via work. Call via work's an interesting new ability. In Lync 2010 and Lync 2013, there was a feature called remote call control, and that's the ability to remotely control a PBX phone from your Lync client. So I'm sat at my desk on my PC, I click to call Bob, and rather than using my Lync client, the Lync server talks to the PBX, causes my PBX phone to go off hook and call Bob. And this gave a basic click to call type functionality, and a lot of people really liked it. However, over time it depreciated in importance as people use Lync more as the PBX. So they would use a headset or they would have a Lync phone and they wouldn't have a PBX phone. But nevertheless, some people still use it. It's a bit of a challenge from a supportability standpoint because the PBX vendors don't really like it. They'd rather you use the PBX, and Microsoft would rather you use Skype or Lync as enterprise voice as a full PBX as well. So it was kind of begrudgingly supported on each side, and it relied on some really old protocols called CSTA, which provided the connectivity between the Skype Business Server and the PBX, and it's not the best supported on either side of the fence. So in Skype for Business, Call via Work replaces that functionality to some extent. It's essentially a click to dial functionality. It leverages the existing PBX phones, or it could be a home phone or a mobile phone, it doesn't really matter. And it replaces remote call control. So to give you the scenario, I'm sat at my desk, I want to call Bob, I click to call Bob, but rather than in remote call control, the Skype for Business server sending a command to the PBX, now Skype for Business server is actually going to dial Bob. So it sets up a call and rings me as the PBX user with my PBX phone. I pick up my phone off hook and I hear ring back. So now Skype for Business is calling the destination phone. So it calls me first, then it calls the destination phone, I hear ringing, and it bridges the two together. So essentially I've had a click to call experience. I've clicked, I've picked up my phone, I've heard ringing, and then the destination phone is answered. But instead of sending a signal to the PBX, the Skype Business Server is literally making and bridging the call. So all calls now run through the Skype Business Server to the PBX. This means you need to architect your Skype for Business to be enterprise voice ready and to deal with the call concurrency to bridge all those calls. It's also worth noting this is an outbound only technology. So if an inbound call comes from the PSTN to the PBX won't notify the Skype for Business server, and there'll be no inbound toast or no click to answer. It really is click to dial and bridge. Server-side conversation history. This is one of the really nice new features. So in Lync Server 2013, we had a mobile client or mobile clients, and there was a conversation history that was held on the mobile phone in the app, and then there was your conversation history on your desktop, which was held in Exchange. And the two were separate. So if you had a conversation in the mobile app, that conversation history was held locally in the app, and you couldn't later search for it on desktop. Similarly, from the mobile app, you couldn't see the conversation history from your desktop client. With Skype Business Server 2015, the conversation history is now centralized on the server side. So your conversations on your mobile clients and on your desktop are all held in Exchange, and the conversations sync up. So I can start on desktop and continue on mobile, or I can start on mobile and continue on desktop. It really makes for a much improved experience. It should be noted that this requires Exchange 2013 as well as Skype for Business Server, so you have to be on the latest and greatest on both counts. Video Interoperability Server. This is a brand new server role to Skype for Business. It's a really interesting one. Viz, as it's called, allows interop between Skype for Business servers and select video teleconferencing units, which is a generic term for room-based video systems. So specifically in this release, it's Cisco Tamberg type endpoints. If you know them, C40, C60, EX60, EX90, these are the desk-based systems you sometimes see in exec rooms where it's a dedicated video endpoint just for the exec to do video calls. Previously, if you wanted to integrate this type of endpoint, you had to use a third-party bridging or gateway product, something like Polycom or Acano. Now Skype for Business has a first-party option as well. This is a dedicated server role, you can't co-locate it, and it essentially functions like a mediation server, but rather than just audio, it's doing audio and video. It's a pretty intense role in terms of CPU, so it has to be in a standalone pool, there is no co-location. And at the moment, it's only limited to select endpoints in terms of VTCs. So interesting role, no additional licensing required, and worth investigating if you use any Cisco Tandberg endpoints. Call quality dashboard. This is one I'm really excited about. Lync Server 2013 and Skype for Business have some great monitoring reports built in, and they run on SQL reporting server. So each call is logged, and stats about loss and jitter and latency are stored, and you can go into SQL reporting service and pull up some reports. And that's great if you're troubleshooting a call or a few calls. What it's not so good at is giving you overarching trends of how you're doing in terms of voice quality or video quality. The call quality dashboard is aimed at meeting that requirement. Instead of using SQL reporting services, it has its own dedicated SQL server which generates a special reporting queue which allows for fast querying and reporting. It then has a web-based interface which is all HTML5 and JavaScript. So it allows quick editing of reports, quick changes of queries, and really fast response times, even over data for thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of users. The performance from the SQL reporting queue is generally around less than a second in terms of a response. It actually ships out of band, so it's installed as a separate MSI from download.microsoft.com, and it is backwards compatible with Lync Server 2013 as well. It does require an extra dedicated server, but if you have a reasonable size environment and need ongoing trends of how your performance is over multiple sessions, it's really worth a look. New Office 365 or hybrid features. This is pretty much breaking news as we record this course. There are a bunch of new features coming to Skype Business Online, and some might even have an impact on how you design your topology. The first one is Skype Meeting Broadcast. So Skype for Business has a meeting ability, a conferencing ability, and it generally scales to about 250 participants. If you deploy a dedicated pool to conferencing, you can take that 250 up to 1,000 participants. But it's generally intended to be a collaboration web conference type platform, not an all hands broadcast type scenario. Skype Meeting Broadcast, on the other hand, is designed to fit exactly that requirement. It's an ability to start a Skype meeting and have it rebroadcast out to up to 10,000 people. It's a cloud-based service using Azure and the Azure Media Services network, and it requires hybrid to be set up as you're leveraging the cloud. You can set up a special broadcast meeting from a portal, and presenters can join and have the usual Skype for Business look and feel, but organisers have additional abilities such as changing camera or doing intro and exit announcements, recording in the cloud, and you can see from the picture on the left, in the web browser they can rebrand it to their own brand so it doesn't have to look like Skype for Business. They can add plugins and overlays and integrate Twitter or Yammer or whatever they want to in terms of user experience. And this is really designed for the kind of shareholder meeting or company all hands type scenario where it's not a collaborative meeting, it's a broadcast from one to many. PSTN conferencing. This has been on server on-prem for years and years. It's the ability to dial in with an old school traditional phone number into a conference. Still a heavily used methodology enterprise in terms of joining conferences. Unfortunately, it wasn't available in Office 365 initially, and then it was available but through third-party providers called audio conferencing providers. So this bridged a gap where you could sign up to Office 365 and you could sign up with an audio conferencing provider and they would provide you dial-in numbers to Skype for Business Online. However, now Microsoft are offering first-party PSTN conferencing numbers. So you can sign up for Office 365 and pay Microsoft for a number of inbound PSTN numbers to join your conferences. Cloud PBX with PSTN calling. This is the newest announcement and it's currently in preview in the US. This is the ability to have essentially an enterprise voice type phone number but in the Office 365 Skype Business Online offering. It's not quite the same as enterprise voice, some of the advanced features aren't there yet, but it does give you a real phone number as a business user from that cloud-based offering. A really nice addition there and might mean some basic knowledge workers that just need a phone number now fit well for the cloud scenario. Finally, a technology that kind of brings all of these together, Azure Express Route for Office 365. So one of the challenges with Skype for Business Online at the moment is all the connectivity is over internet. So if I have important conferences or I want to run my phone system in the cloud, I have to trust that my internet connection between me and the Office 365 service is going to be good enough. And the reality is, it mostly is. Internet connectivity is pretty strong these days. You can get diverse routing from carriers, so at least you have 2 different carriers from your business. But nobody can guarantee internet connectivity. And that's the challenge for enterprises that need to guarantee a service to their users. Azure Express Route has been around for a while, and it's the ability for certain third-party providers to provide a dedicated connection between your business or your network and Azure for compute resource. And that functionality is now coming to Office 365. So I can go to my carrier who provides my MPLS WAN connectivity and say I want an additional tail off to Office 365 that's dedicated to me, proper SLA, and they have an interconnect agreement with Microsoft where they can provide a direct connection to Office 365. So this technology really lights up the ability to do voice in the cloud, because now I have a guaranteed connection between my Office and the cloud PBX with PSTN calling. Deployment improvements. These form a big part of this course. The first one is in-place upgrades, a brand new functionality to Skype for Business. Previously, whenever we got a new version of Lync or Skype for Business, we deployed it side by side, we tested, and we moved our users across. We needed new hardware, new certificates, new IP addressing, a new design, a new plan, a decent amount of work to get it done. For the first time now, we can do an in-place upgrade over an existing Lync 2013 pool. So I have a Lync 2013 pool, I make a few clicks, and it uninstalls Lync 2013 and installs Skype for Business. And we'll be going through that exact scenario later in this course. The second improvement is Smart Setup. This is a nice addition, and you might have seen it in other products such as SQL. Now the Skype for Business installer, when it goes to install, now the Skype for Business installer, when you go to complete an install, has an option to go and check with Microsoft and download the latest binaries to install during the install process. So rather than having to install the RTM bits and then immediately go and get a patch, the installer will go and grab the latest bits for you and lay them down during the install process, which saves a cycle at the end of an install. In this module, we've had an overview of all the key new features for Skype for Business and some new features for Skype for Business Online. And these should help inform your design decisions in your Skype for Business deployment. Skype for Business Server, topologies and roles. In this module, we're going to go over all the Skype for Business Server roles. It's really important to understand all these roles and options to successfully deploy Skype for Business Server. But more than that, we're going to look at the underlying supporting infrastructure. You can't have success in Skype for Business without the correct supporting infrastructure, so we need to understand that too. Then finally, we're going to look at some typical topologies and what are the pros and cons of each. Skype for Business Server and Services. The front-end server. This is the core server that runs all the key services. This does our user authentication, our registration. It holds the presence information for whether we're available, busy, free. It holds the address book. It holds all the AV MCU, the conferencing. Basically, this is the most important server in your environment. There's two editions of this server. There's Standard Edition and Enterprise Edition. Both of them have exactly the same feature set, so you're not choosing between one or another because of feature set. Often people see Enterprise Edition and think, well, I'm an enterprise, therefore I need the Enterprise Edition, but that's not really the decision point. It's about high availability and scale. So the Enterprise Edition will support up to 6,600 users per server, and you can have a pool of up to 12 of those servers. So they run in a high availability pool, and that will support up to 80,000 users in that pool. Obviously, you can then go on to have multiple pools in different regions or different data centers. To support that load, you need those servers plus a back-end SQL server to support all the databases. So for a large environment that requires high availability, Enterprise Edition is the way to go. But it's more servers and more complicated. Standard Edition, on the other hand, holds all the roles and the databases on a single server. It will still scale to 2,500 users per server in day-to-day running, and it'll even scale to 5,000 in a DR scenario. You can have two Standard Edition servers pool paired, which is a term for connecting them together to provide some level of resilience for the users. It's not quite the same as a proper Enterprise Edition pool in terms of availability, but it gives some quick failover ability. So two good options there depending on the scale of your environment and the requirements of your business. And you can mix and match these requirements. So you might have Standard Edition in one country and Enterprise Edition in another. They all work together seamlessly. Windows Fabric is an important element of Skype for Business. The Enterprise Edition pool relies on Windows Fabric, which is a server-side technology to share data across a pool of servers. It's something you'll hear about as you dive deeper into Skype for Business as a key dependency. You don't need to know too much about it. It's a bit of a black box, but it's important to understand it's there. And as we mentioned, both editions require a SQL backend. Standard Edition uses SQL Express on the same box, and Enterprise Edition uses a standalone SQL server, which can be mirrored, clustered, or using always on. We'll talk about that further later in the SQL section. These servers run many services, so let's take a deeper look at those services. There's the registrar service. This is the service that, as the name suggests, registers your users. So when I sign into Skype for Business, I go and find my registrar and I say I'd like to log in for the day. The registrar service is responsible for the authentication and the authorization of my accounts being logged in. Next, we have the conferencing MCUs. MCU stands for multi-point control unit. It's a bit of an old term for a conferencing device, but essentially you can think of an MCU as something that's responsible for combining multiple sessions. So it could be multiple instant messaging sessions, it could be audio, it could be video. Anytime there's more than two parties in a session, an MCU is going to be involved. Next, we have the mediation service. We'll dive into this a bit more in the mediation section in this module. But at a high level, this service is responsible for PSTN connectivity to gateways. So this is the service that allows us to make phone calls via Skype for Business. There's CMS replication. CMS stands for Central Management Store. That's the key store of all the information about our topology and environment. And that data is actively replicated around all the front-end servers. There's the response group service. Response groups are similar to hunt groups, if you know PBX terminology. So they're multiple groups of users that want to be rung at the same time or rung one after another. For an example, when you ring a sales line and you hear press 1 for this product, 2 for that product, 3 for support, that's what a response group does. And it can get quite advanced in how it routes calls to users, based on particular groups they're in or even based on their presence. There's the conference announcement service and the conference attendant service. These services work together to add you to conferences and announce people joining and leaving the conferences. Centralized logging service. As you might guess, this is responsible for logging. It's a really nice addition since Lync Server 2013. It can log over multiple front-end servers at the same time and centralize the logs for you to collect. Call park. This might be a pretty easy one to guess. If you want to park a call, so this is a common retail requirement. I'm on a call and I want to put it on hold and announce over the tannoy, Bob, can you pick up the call on *62? That's a call park, and that service is responsible for taking that call and looking after it until someone picks it back up. Finally, the audio test service. Again, easy one to guess. This service allows you to make a test audio call from your client to the server, and it will play you back the results. It's a great way to test the quality of your line if you're in a new environment or on Wi-Fi. Mediation and gateways. Next most important in most environments after the front-end server are mediation and gateways. Mediation is either a service or a separate server depending on how you deploy it, and it's responsible for translating signaling and sometimes media depending on the call scenario between the Skype for Business world and the more traditional standards-based telephony world. So this is the box that does the magic that allows me to make a call from my Skype for Business software client all the way out to the global PSTN anywhere around the world. It can be co-located on the front-end server, in which case it has a maximum concurrent calls of around 150, or it can be broken out to a standalone server, which allows it to scale much, much higher. The max concurrent calls on a standalone server is 1500. Typically, it will be co-located if you have Enterprise Edition and have multiple front-end servers, but in busier, heavier environments with more concurrent calls, it's not unusual to have dedicated mediation servers. It's obviously required for Enterprise Voice. If you don't have it, you can't do PSTN calling in Skype for Business. And it's paired with a gateway or session border controller. Those two terms are used interchangeably quite often. A session border controller or gateway is a device that sits between the Skype for Business world and the traditional PSTN world, and it could be connecting to a more traditional public switch telephony network ISDN type connection, which is a special connection just for PSTN, or it could be a standard-based IP connection over a protocol called SIP, Session Initiation Protocol. Increasingly, the PSTN network is going towards IP-based SIP connectivity, and these devices sit between our Skype for Business world and the telephony world. There are some SIP providers that have certified with Microsoft to connect directly to the mediation server. So essentially their session border controller on their network will connect direct to mediation, and you don't need to deploy a session border controller. Generally, if you're operating at any scale, there's a lot of value in having the DMARC of a dedicated session border controller. And it also gives you the ability to flip any value you might want to in terms of protocols and signaling and media types. So lots of flexibility in deploying a gateway or session border controller. Survivable branch, appliance or server. It makes sense to talk about these after mediation and gateways, because these are essentially those two roles in a single box, designed to provide resiliency for a branch in the event of a WAN failure. The scenario is I have a large central office and they have their own data center locally with their pool, or they have very good connectivity to the data center, and then I have a branch office with a single WAN link. I don't necessarily want to rely on that single WAN link for all my telephony connectivity, but I don't want to build a whole pool in that branch site either. So the survivable branch appliance is a combined gateway and server. The server runs the registrar service, so the basic sign-in service, and it runs the mediation server service. And the gateway side of the box has a direct connection to the PSTN. This means if I lose my WAN connection, I have a box in the branch site that can still make and receive basic PSTN calls, which gives us a good level of resiliency in the event of a WAN failure. These boxes can be as little as 1U and half depth, so they slot into a branch quite well. If we want to scale up a bit, we have the survivable branch server. In this model, we break out the server running the registrar and the mediation service and have a separate gateway. So a survivable branch appliance will scale from 20 users up to a few hundred. Survivable branch server, because we can choose our hardware and choose our gateway, can scale well into the hundreds and even beyond by stacking up multiple servers and multiple gateways. So this is a key element to think about in terms of your branch site resiliency. Edge server. This is one of my favorite server roles. This is really what makes Skype for Business Server so exciting. You deploy it in a data center, in a customer, and this is the server that connects us to the outside world. So why would we want to be connected to the outside world? Well, firstly, remote access. With Skype for Business, we need remote access. If we're working from home, working from Starbucks, we want to be able to still communicate and make and receive our calls. We might be working on mobile, we might be working on PCs, it doesn't really matter. You could argue that you could come in over VPN for some IT services, but VPNs aren't really optimized for real-time media. So typically audio and video over VPN can be choppy. The Edge server is really optimized for audio and video. Beyond just remote access, we also have federation. Federation is the ability to connect from one Skype for Business environment to another. So one company to talk to another. This is amazing in terms of communications between companies. So now I can instant message, voice, video, federate, desktop share between other companies, even multiple companies at the same time. Typically, we find companies increasingly collaborate with their partners and increasingly use things like conferencing and desktop sharing to demo to partners, suppliers, customers. So having that ability to as easily communicate outside your organization as inside your organization is a real killer feature. The Edge server is also used for conference join. So even if the remote party doesn't have Skype for Business or Lync, they can still join a conference and get the full audio video service, either through a client they download or even in the browser. Finally, hybrid. We talked about hybrid at the start of the course. It's becoming an increasingly common requirement. Hybrid in this scenario is connecting our Skype for Business server environment to the Office 365 Skype for Business Online environment. And for the Skype workload, a lot of that hybrid action happens through the Edge server. As you might have guessed by the name, this server sits in the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, and it's firewalled off. The Edge server has two NICs. It has one on an inside DMZ and one on an outside DMZ. And that's all to keep us securely connected from the outside world to the inside world. It's also not domain joined from a security standpoint because it sits in a DMZ. Some interesting deployment requirements there, and we'll go through those in the deployment video. Persistent chat. You might say Skype for Business already has chat. I've seen it, instant messaging. Well, persistent chat is a little bit different. In a normal Skype for Business IM, I send my message to my friend or my multiple friends, and when we close down the session, that session goes into our conversation history. We can go back and look at it, we can even reference it and continue it, but it's the chat essentially is over. Persistent chat is more the concept of an ongoing channel or chat room that persists over time. I can jump in it, I can jump out of it. If I'm on holiday, I can come back and review all the chats and see what's going on. It's a server role that's used very heavily in finance. Some finance houses absolutely live in persistent chat. They have bots that add data to those rooms, and the traders or bankers live in those rooms. It's also used often as an IT incident type room. So if you're running around the clock incident, people can drop in and out of the chat room and see what's going on. And if they drop out, they haven't lost the previous history. They can review it at their leisure. Interestingly, with this role, you can co-locate it with Standard Edition server, but not with Enterprise Edition. So if you're running a smaller environment, Microsoft are happy that it can coexist with Standard Edition. But their assumption is if you're using Enterprise Edition, you're into a bigger environment, so you want to break out persistent chat onto its own servers. And like other elements of Skype for Business, this depends on SQL. All the backend data is held in SQL, and you need a SQL instance to support persistent chat. The Director server. Director's a increasingly depreciated role, but it's still available in Skype for Business. This is a dedicated user authentication and redirection server. It's optional and it's not common, but the scenario is you could have multiple pools and you have a director, and when you sign in, you go to your director first, and then that redirects you to your home pool. The theory being that saves a little bit of load if you went to the wrong pool first and then got redirected. You'd always get redirected without a director, hence optional. The other place where a director lives is the next hop from the Edge server. We talked about the Edge server, that's the server that connects us to the outside world. Some customers like an additional hop between the Edge server and the inside world. The Edge server doesn't authenticate users, so when you connect to an Edge server, it's pushing your traffic straight through to the pool to authenticate you and then send your traffic on if you're authenticated. A director can sit between those two roles. It doesn't home any users, so any impact to the director server doesn't impact the user pool, but it can authenticate users, so it can authenticate between the Edge server and the inside environment. We don't really see it deployed very often anymore. It's only really in environments where there's very strict security requirements and they like the extra hop between the Edge server and the inside environment. Video interoperability server. This is one of our brand new roles for Skype for Business, and it's quite an interesting one. This allows us to connect our Skype for Business world with its slightly proprietary codec in terms of audio and video to standards-based room systems referred to as video teleconferencing systems by Microsoft in their documentation. But essentially we're talking about Cisco Tamberg type systems. So room-based systems that sit either on a desk or in a bigger room, and people do video conferencing on them. Natively, those room-based systems use slightly different protocols and standards, so you can't just make a call from those straight to Skype for Business. Increasingly, these worlds are merging, and some vendors such as Polycom support the Skype for Business codecs natively in their endpoints. At the moment, Cisco Tamberg in particular don't. So this server role sits between those two environments and essentially does transcoding of the media and the signaling between those two environments to allow a Skype for Business user to talk with a video room-based user. It's definitely a dedicated server role. It's doing some kind of transcoding, so it's very CPU intensive, and it doesn't scale terribly high in terms of number of concurrent sessions per server. Supporting infrastructure. We've now talked about all the core Skype for Business servers and roles, but just as important is the supporting infrastructure. First up is SQL. It has to be SQL first. It's so important to Skype for Business. SQL holds a lot of the data for Skype for Business. It holds all the back-end databases, so your user data, your buddy list, your conferences, your monitoring data, your persistent chat data, all relies heavily on SQL. But more than that, there's actually SQL Express on all Lync servers. So each Lync server holds a copy of key data in SQL Express, and it replicates that data between other servers. Your current present state, for example, is held in SQL Express on the front-end server, not just in the back-end database. The back-end database essentially is a lazy blob store for a lot of data, whereas the key data you need to be quickly available is held in SQL Express on the front-end servers. Monitoring and archiving both use SQL for their storage. The call quality dashboard that we talked about at the start of the series, one of the new features, relies entirely on SQL and uses some advanced SQL features like SQL Cube to do its reporting. In terms of SQL support, we have a nice variety of support for high availability. So we have clustering, mirroring, and always on. Active Directory, DNS, file shares, and certificate authorities. It's hard to put these into a particular priority because Skype for Business depends on all of them, and if any of them aren't there, you'll have issues. But I guess Active Directory is probably the core. As with most Microsoft technologies, Active Directory provides the authentication for Skype for Business. Next up, we have the domain name system, DNS. All services and servers are essentially discovered through DNS. When I sign into Skype for Business for the first time, what my client is doing is looking at my sign-in name, looking at the DNS suffix, so the domain.com element of my name, going and doing a service lookup in DNS to try and find my Skype for Business server. If it can't find the servers, I can't sign in. File shares used throughout the environment to share key data between the servers and also to hold some transient data such as meeting information. And finally, certificate authorities and certificates. Everything in Skype for Business is secure by default. We extensively use TLS and mutual TLS. In order to support that over all the services and all the servers, we require certificate authorities to issue certificates. You can have an internal certificate authority, which is the most common scenario, or you can rely entirely on a public certificate authority. So one that's external to your company and you go and pay per certificate per name. With Skype for Business, we require so many certificates and so many names. It's usual to have an internal certificate authority for most of your certificates and only use a public certificate authority for some roles that are internet facing, like reverse proxy and edge. Skype for Business is really incomplete without Exchange, be it Exchange Server on-prem or Exchange Online in the cloud. Exchange provides our unified messaging, or our voicemail for Skype for Business. It also holds our conversation history. That's all our previous conversations accessible to us in Outlook or OA. In terms of Outlook, Outlook is used to schedule meetings, so we saw in the demo the Outlook meeting add-in. That's a big benefit to users who live in Outlook, being able to schedule meetings direct from Outlook. We can support on-prem or online for Exchange. It doesn't really matter which, but you've got to consider Exchange as a dependency in your designs for Skype for Business. Office Web App Server. This is actually a SharePoint role, so why do we need it for Skype for Business? Well, this is a shared Office server role across all the products. So it is a SharePoint role, but in Skype for Business, it's used particularly to encode PowerPoint files. So when you upload a PowerPoint file in a meeting, the Office Web App Server takes that file, encodes it from the PowerPoint standard to a more friendly low bandwidth standard suitable for all the different types of mobile devices and desktop devices that connect to Skype for Business. It's a shared role, so while it's used for Skype for Business, it could also be used for SharePoint or even Outlook Web App. All those servers use this same Office Web App server for presenting and manipulating Office documents. Hardware load balancers and reverse proxies. Most traffic to and from Skype for Business servers can be what we call DNS load balanced. The Skype for Business clients are clever enough to know there are multiple servers in play through a combination of looking at DNS records and being told by the servers, and the traffic doesn't need to go through a hardware load balancer. But there are some services, particularly web traffic, HTTP, HTTPS traffic, that does require a hardware load balancer. So our web services and our simple URLs, for example, when I click to join a meeting, I'm hitting meet.domain.com. That's going to a hardware load balancer, which is then sending it on to the Skype Business servers. Similarly, some services that require HTTPS from the client, for example, address book download, is a web service, and that's going to go through a hardware load balancer. These devices can be physical or virtual, so they don't have to be a massive beefy device. It can be a simple VM. And it's recommended to use DNS load balancing wherever you can, particularly for SIP traffic, and just use hardware load balancers for the web traffic. The reverse proxy is a role that sits alongside the edge server in the DMZ, and that's what presents web services to the outside world. So if I'm on my corporate network and I click to join a meeting, I'm going to hit the hardware load balancer and then go direct to the pool that hosts the meeting. If a person's joining from another company or joining from home or the outside world, when they click the link, they're going to go to the reverse proxy, which provides a security DMARC to then send the web traffic on into the internal network. Also, the new Skype for Business mobile clients all use HTTPS as their primary signaling method. So all that web traffic that's going from the outside world comes through the reverse proxy. Let's start with some topology concepts. Skype for Business is ruled by a single global topology. This is a really cool concept. There's a single, essentially XML file that holds the topology of all the environment. And as you install and uninstall servers, they reference that topology to understand what their server role is and what services they should be running. This is a great model because it allows us to have the Skype for Business topology builder validate some of our design decisions before we even get to deploy the servers. So whereas many products will let you deploy a server and tick any roles you want during the deployment process, with Skype for Business you have to choose your deployment up front in terms of topology, publish it through the topology builder, and then you're ready to deploy your server. Within topology we have sites. We can have multiple sites, and sites typically represent offices or countries or deployments. Each site must have at least one pool to be qualified as a site. Along with our sites we have branch sites. We talked earlier about survivable branch appliances. If we have a survivable branch appliance, it will be a branch site. Next step down after sites are pools and pool pairing. So each Skype Business server deployment is referred to as a pool, even if it's a standard edition single server. Just to keep a common terminology, we refer to that as a pool. You can have multiple pools in a site, and you can pair pools. Pairing pools allows you to connect two pools together, and they replicate key data between each other. Should one fail, the other one can take over for those users. Topology Builder is a tool that holds all this information together. Topology Builder is where we publish our server roles and where we can reference all our server roles. When we publish our roles in Topology Builder, that topology XML file goes into something called the Central Management Store. And that's the single source of truth for our Skype for Business topology. The Central Management Store is then the source of replication for that topology over to all the other servers that keep a local copy of that topology so they can understand the environment and what their server roles are. We've been through all the server roles and supporting infrastructure and how topologies work. Let's look at some typical topologies. We'll start off with a small Skype business topology. This is a Microsoft reference sample topology. In their small world, they have 2 standard edition servers. So that's 2 servers theoretically capable of supporting up to 2,500 users each. And they're pool paired. So they're replicating all the key data of the users between the 2 pools, and should one fail, the other one can take over with full service after a few PowerShell commands. There's a single edge server connecting us to the outside world, and we see our reverse proxy as well. So we've got federation, we've got remote access, we've potentially got access to hybrid. We also have our PSTN gateway, which is connecting us to the PSTN, the public switch telephony network, so we can make and receive enterprise voice calls. I see an Office web app server, so we've got the PowerPoint encoding covered, and Exchange UM is on-prem in this case. There's an Exchange unified messaging server providing all our voicemail. We also see we've got one branch site with a survivable branch appliance, and that WAN link between the survivable branch and our central site. So should we lose the WAN link, we can see there's a PSTN connection there for the survivable branch appliance, and those users can carry on making and receiving phone calls. This topology is a fairly typical starting topology for a Skype for Business deployment. It provides the full feature set, you've got everything you need for the core features, you've got very few servers and all the servers can be virtualized, and you don't have to have any dedicated SQL for this environment. If it was me deploying a small deployment, I'd still be really inclined to deploy at least a single SQL server for archiving and monitoring data. Without that, you haven't got much reporting on what's going on in your environment. A medium to large Skype for Business topology. You can see in the medium and large, we've jumped now to front-end pools. So we have 2 sites and we have 2 front-end pools. Those front-end pools must have a minimum of 3 front-end servers and at least 1 SQL server to support their database, but they could scale up to 12 front-end servers per pool depending on the scale required. Because they're pool paired, we want the 2 front-end server pools to match in terms of capacity. It's no good having a pool with 3 front-end servers being the failover partner for a pool with 9 front-end servers. The user load for the 9 server pool is clearly not going to be supported by a pool with only 3 servers. So we have to think about balancing our pools evenly. We've got a couple of branch sites that have no infrastructure at all. So in this case, the customer's decided that the WAN is good enough for that connectivity, and they're quite happy to rely on the WAN for all services. This is increasingly common. People have resilient WAN links. Companies that rely on IT rely on it for more than just telephony. If you lose the WAN link, even with telephony, they don't have access to their other IT services. So some companies just decide that they're paying for a resilient WAN and they'll leverage it for their voice connectivity. We can see in Central Site C, we have a standard edition server. So this might be a slightly bigger site than a branch, but not big enough to justify a front-end pool. Maybe it's 500 users. If the WAN goes down, they need full service, not just the voice resiliency that a survivable branch appliance would give them, but full conferencing, buddy lists, all their data. So while they haven't got pool level resiliency, should they lose the WAN, they've still got full services. Jumping to a large topology. So here we see pretty much all the roles we can get. Central Site A is running a front-end pool, it's paired, it's running mirrored back-end SQL servers, so we've got 2 servers resilience there. If we lose one, the other one carries on. We have persistent chat server, and supporting that we have the persistent chat compliance server, which is essentially archiving persistent chat. We have Office web apps and Exchange UM on-prem, and again we have our edge server and reverse proxy. We have multiple PSTN gateways and a couple of survivable branch appliances. When thinking about these topology examples, don't forget we can mix and match. You can think about most of the components of the topology as bricks that you can swap in or out depending on your requirements. What have we covered in this module? We've gone through the Skype Business servers, services and their roles, We've looked at some typical topologies, and we've considered some design considerations for our topologies. Planning a new install of Skype for Business at CCDD Bank. We've been over what's new in Skype for Business, and we've been over the key topologies and roles. Now it's time to jump into our first customer scenario. In this module, we're going to get introduced to CCDD Bank and understand their goals and requirements. We're going to look at their current topology. We're going to go through some design decisions for moving them up to Skype for Business. We're then going to go over their Skype for Business design. And finally, we're going to go over a deployment plan to get from their current status to Skype for Business. They're a bank of 2,000 users. They have an existing resilient Lync 2013 deployment, and they are using it for enterprise voice. Usually, if customers are using enterprise voice, the upgrade is going to be much more considered because it's their phone system, so it's of vital importance. As we know, they've learnt about Skype for Business and they've decided they do want to move to Skype for Business. One of their key drivers is wanting to federate with Skype Consumer Network. So they see a real benefit in being able to reach out to their customers on Skype Consumer from their Skype for Business infrastructure. And key, their IT policy dictates a strict gates process of design, build, test, and gradual migration. So they have strict policies in place that will impact our design decisions. So what's their current topology look like? Well, it's fairly easy. They've got 2 gateways for resilience, and they've got 2 Lync standard edition servers. The standard edition servers are in a pool pair for resilience, and they have a single SQL archiving and monitoring database. This is a fairly typical environment for up to a couple of thousand users. Each one of those Lync 2013 standard edition servers are rated to run 2,500 users in usual working process and up to 5,000 in DR. So they've got full resilience even if they lose a server. Likewise, they've got 2 gateways, so if they lost one of those, they could carry on working. So it's a fairly nice setup for a 2,000 user organisation. So how do we take them up to Skype for Business? Well, we've got various design decisions to make. The first one being, do we do an in-place upgrade? In-place upgrade is the first thing to consider for any upgrade from Lync 2013 to Skype for Business. They do potentially meet the requirements. They have an easy 2013 infrastructure that could be in-place upgraded. If they were on 2010, obviously they couldn't in-place, but they're all 2013. However, in this case, the IT policy and process is what's going to block an in-place upgrade. Their policies dictate a strict gate process. So things must be designed, deployed and tested before live users go on. And then there's a testing and acceptance phase with IT, and then real users go on. An in-place upgrade is more or less all or nothing. We could theoretically do one pool and then test and then do the other pool. But during that window, our pool pair failover is not officially supported. And that's a risk a finance house typically won't take. Also, it's not unusual, particularly in finance, to have third-party applications involved in the Lync Server infrastructure. So the customer might have an ethical walls product that overlays on Lync 2013 to stop certain users talking to other users, for example, buy side and sell side in a finance house, or you might have a recording product that records audio and video calls. Some of these products support in-place upgrade, some of them don't. Either way, in that type of environment, you're likely to want to test extensively before rolling out an upgrade. So IT policies and possibly third-party software push us towards more of a side-by-side migration process. This is the more traditional Lync upgrade process we've seen in previous versions. We're still going to upgrade the topology, but we're going to build a side-by-side Skype for Business infrastructure alongside the Lync infrastructure that we can test extensively and then swing the users across in our own time. We have a decision to make between Standard Edition and Enterprise Edition. Here we can see that Standard Edition has met all the requirements for the business in terms of availability. They're happy with pool pairing for voice resiliency, And there's no difference in feature set for the users from Standard Edition to Enterprise Edition. So unless there was a compelling business reason, taking them to Enterprise Edition, which would involve 3 servers per pool on each pool, and at least 1 SQL backend for each pool, is quite a big upgrade. Since we know they've been happy with Standard Edition in the past, we're going to go with Standard Edition for our Skype for Business deployment. In terms of their specific business requirements, they have federation as a requirement. We noticed on their existing topology, they've got no edge or reverse proxy. So they're going to have no external access, no remote access, and no federation. We want to add that federation ability in. In particular, they want to unlock the ability to federate from Skype for Business to Skype Consumer. And so to do that, we're going to have to deploy a new edge server and a reverse proxy. And since we're doing no in-place upgrade, we're doing side-by-side, we're going to deploy a new monitoring and archiving database. Conceptually, we could in-place upgrade the monitoring and archiving database, and it would work fine with Lync Server 2013. But again, IT policy says we do side-by-side and we test. So we're going to deploy side-by-side. We have our design decisions. Let's look at our planned topology. You can see the original infrastructure on the right, the 2 Standard Edition Lync servers and the SQL archiving and monitoring. And we've still got our 2 gateways in play. But on the left of the picture, you'll see we've now got 2 Standard Edition Skype for Business servers. And we've also got a new edge server and a new reverse proxy. The edge server and reverse proxy are going to meet our business requirement to do federation. And we have a new SQL monitoring and archiving server on the left just for Skype for Business. And that's meeting our business requirement to deploy and test before putting any users on the infrastructure. So essentially we're building a side-by-side complete Skype for Business infrastructure. We can then test that and then move users across. We can realign our existing production gateway to the new Skype for Business servers. And as and when we're ready, we could decommission the Lync infrastructure and the Lync SQL and monitoring and archiving database. Let's talk about some key server requirements. First, we've got to decide if we're going Server 2012 or Server 2012 R2. Note, Windows Server 2008 R2 is supported for in-place upgrades, but isn't supported for new installs. And that should give you some clue as to Microsoft really wanting you to go 2012 or 2012 R2. We're going to go 2012 R2 because we want to be on the latest and greatest. There's 2 patches in particular we need to meet to be supported. For 2012, it's KB 2858668, and for 2012 R2, which we're going to go for, it's 2982006. And we'll see those as we go through the install. And secondly, we need to choose our SQL Server Edition. We're deploying Skype for Business Standard Edition, so that's going to install its own SQL Express for its databases, but we need a SQL Server Standard Edition or Enterprise Edition for our archiving and monitoring database. We have a range of versions supported, 08R2, 2012 or 2014, and Standard or Enterprise. So what factors influence our SQL decision? Well, if we want to use always on, the latest and greatest availability technology, we have to go to Enterprise Edition. Standard Edition doesn't support it, but Standard Edition will support mirroring on all versions. Enterprise costs a lot more money than Standard Edition. So if mirroring is acceptable as a form of high availability, then we're leaning towards Standard. In our case, it's only archiving and monitoring, so we're not planning to have any kind of additional availability other than backup and restore, so we'll stick with Standard Edition. In terms of version, we obviously want to be as current as we can. In the case of CCDD Bank, they're standardized on SQL 2012, so we're going to go with that. There's no massive compelling reason to go from 2012 to 2014. Skype for Business wise, SQL 2012 is fine. Hardware recommendations. Hardware recommendations in Skype for Business fall into 2 buckets. In our first bucket, we have front-end servers, back-end servers, that's what the Skype team called SQL, Standard Edition servers, and persistent chat servers. And in our second bucket, we have edge servers, standalone mediation servers, video interop servers, and directors. So for CCDD Bank, we're going to be deploying standard edition servers, and we're going to be deploying an edge server. So we'll need both sets. Interestingly, these are recommendations, not requirements. Microsoft have done a bunch of sizing testing available at the link below on the slide. And based on that testing, these are the recommendations they have for optimum performance. But you are supported to go higher or lower depending on your requirements. It's just that if you do have issues that Microsoft think are related to performance, they'll ask you to up the spec to prove it's not a performance related issue. So first, let's look at our front-end, back-end standard edition persistent chat requirements. We have a 64-bit dual processor hex core 2.26 GHz or higher. So that's a bit of a mouthful. It's dual processor and it's hex core. So that's 2 processors of 6 cores. So we're talking 12 cores of 2.26 GHz or higher. We want 32 GB of RAM, which is pretty easy to meet these days. 8 or more 10K hard disks or equivalent SSD. That's not really about meeting a space requirement, that's about meeting an IOPS requirement in terms of speed of the disks. And we want 1 dual port network adapter that's 1 gigabits plus. Dual port is the recommendation because Microsoft recommend teaming that NIC. So we're only going to run 1 IP address on that NIC and 1 interface from a Skype for Business point of view, but Microsoft recommend doing some kind of teaming for availability. Now let's look at the Edge Server, standalone mediation, video interop and director recommendations. So again, 64-bit processor. Pretty much all you can get these days is 64-bit, so that's an odd stipulation, but it's there. And this time we're dual processor quad core, so we're talking about 8 cores. We only have a 16 GB of RAM requirement. None of these server roles have a particularly intense database requirement, and that's where lots of RAM really adds value. So here we're just talking 16. This time 4 10K disks or equivalent SSD. Again, we're not doing things as IO intensive on these server roles as we are on the front end or back end. And again, our dual port NIC 1 gigabit per second or higher. And specifically for our edge server, we need 2 network adapters, one for the inside and one for the outside. So you can see these are some very general recommendations. There's quite a bit of difference in a persistent chat server versus a backend SQL server versus a standard edition server. And likewise, an edge server versus a mediation server versus a video interop server all have slightly different roles too. But these are general recommendations. If you can meet them all, that's great because you're in a really nice place from a supportability standpoint. But don't be afraid to work in the lab, test and measure, and move away from those requirements. In particular, 12 cores on a front-end server is quite high for most deployments, particularly if you're deploying virtually, considering that you need to dedicate the cores one-to-one to the Skype for Business deployment. The RAM, disk I/O and gigabit NIC requirements are usually pretty easy to get in any environment. And don't forget, hardware is relatively cheap these days. You might want to scrimp on the specs a little bit, but consider this is a real-time unified communications platform. Troubleshooting a platform like this is usually going to cost more money than the hardware costs, so it's a balancing act. We've got our new topology and we've met our hardware and software specifications, so now let's think about our deployment plan. First thing to do is patch Lync Server 2013 to current. We can't deploy Skype for Business until the existing Lync 2013 environment is patched, so we're going to go through how to do that. Once we're all patched up, we're ready to add our new servers, add the Skype for Business admin tools, and add the Skype for Business servers to the topology. Once the topology is replicated, we're ready to deploy our Skype for Business Standard Edition servers. Next, we'll deploy our Skype for Business Edge server. Then we'll pool pair our Skype for Business Standard Edition servers and deploy our new monitoring and archiving server. And finally, we'll configure basic enterprise voice in our new Skype for Business environment. Module summary. We've talked through the CCDD Bank scenario. We've spoken about why we're going to go side-by-side migration rather than in-place upgrade. We've been through our new Skype for Business Standard Edition topology. And we've walked through our deployment plan. In the next module, we'll begin the deployment. Installing Skype for Business Server 2015 Standard Edition. In this module, we're going to cover a Greenfield deployment example. We're going to step away from our CCDD bank scenario for a minute and just talk about Greenfield. When we say Greenfield, we mean an environment that's never had any Skype for Business or Lync deployed in it. Just in case that's something you're going to come across, I wanted to show how that works before we jump into the CCDD scenario. Then we're going to go through patching Lync Server 2013. That's an essential step before deploying Skype for Business. Then we're going to see our side-by-side Skype for Business Server deployment at CCDD Bank. Greenfield deployment. A Greenfield deployment is where you're deploying Skype for Business for the first time ever in the environment. So there's never been any OCS, any Lync, or any Skype for Business. The first thing we need to do is install the Skype for Business admin tools. Then we'll prepare Active Directory. And finally, we'll add our users to the CS Administrators group. At that stage, our environment's ready for its first Skype for Business server. So let's jump into the demo and see that in action. Demo, Skype for Business Greenfield deployment. So we're stepping away from our CCDD bank scenario for a minute, and we're just going to look at a normal Greenfield deployment for Skype for Business. So here we are on the domain greenfield.com. It's a new 2012 domain, and they've never had an OCS, a Lync, or a Skype for Business server. So it's brand new. We're sitting on SEO1, which is going to be the first standard edition server in their environment. So how do we get from here to being ready to install a Skype for Business server? First thing, this is an SE, standard edition, so we need to ensure we've got the prerequisites in place. As discussed, we can use PowerShell to set our prerequisites. Here, I've already copied the prerequisites from the website. If we go into PowerShell, we can run this. This server's all ready to go. There's no changes required, which means that all the Windows servers and services and dependencies are all installed. So we're good to go on that front. Next step, we're going to go to the Skype for Business ISO. I've got it mounted here on a network share, and we're going to go to Setup, AMD64, and Setup. Since we're running for the very first time, Visual C++ gets installed as a prereq. Here we see the Smart setup. We're not going to check for updates right now, and our install location. Remembering the install location we set here is later where all the binaries are going to go. So first thing, Skype for Business Server is just installing the core components. These are the components we need to run even for the setup. Core components are now installed, and you'll see the deployment wizard has popped up. The deployment wizard is where we install all the bits for any of our Skype for Business servers. You'll notice it's sitting on determining deployment state. The deployment wizard is actively checking the environment to see what's been deployed before. We can see that we've got prepare Active Directory, we've got install Skype server, prepare standard edition, install admin tools, and some additional options around call quality dashboard, videos, documentation, etc. So where do we begin? Well, before we can do anything really, we want to prepare our Active Directory, so we'll do that first. You'll see we have a number of steps. First, we're going to prepare the schema. Now I'm logged in as a domain admin, an enterprise admin, and a schema admin. For this, I need the schema admin's permission in AD. Skype for Business Server adds a number of schema extensions to handle all the real-time communications elements and attributes for user objects and for the system. And we're completed successfully, so all good there. Next step, we're going to prepare the current forest. We've only got one forest and one domain, so that's nice and easy. We need to choose a domain where the universal groups are created. We'll choose local domain. You'll notice that all these install elements are actually running PowerShell under the covers. So if you want to, you can automate all of these steps. Again, we look good. Greenfield completed successfully. And if we wanted to, we could view the log. Okay, you'll notice we've now got ticks for prepare schema and prepare current forest. Now we're on to prepare the domain. And again, success. So now we have our deployment wizard telling us we've got 3 completes, which is great. Finally, we want to add this administrator to the Skype for Business administrators, so CS administrator. So now we have the schema extension, we have that role in place. Let's jump into users and computers. I'm going to find my administrator. Here it is. So you'll notice now under users, we have a bunch of CS roles. CS is communication server, and that's the prefix since the Lync and OCS days, where it was Office Communication Server. So we have a bunch of role-based access control roles, at CS administrator being the highest powered, right down to some view-only administrator options or user administrator. We're going to give my administrator account CS administrator rights. Member of, we're currently domain admin, enterprise admin, as we said, and a schema admin. We're going to add CS administrators. So there we go, we're now a CS administrator. And that'll give us all the rights we need to proceed with the install and install any Skype for Business roles. If we jump back now, you'll notice the deployment wizard has complete, which tells us we know that Active Directory is prepared. You might think now we want to install a Skype for Business server, but there's a few other steps first. We're going to install the admin tools. The admin tools installs our topology builder, and that's what defines our whole topology as we discussed previously. So we can't deploy a Skype for Business server until we've defined it in the topology. Okay, our admin tools are now installed. So if we look at start, we'll see we've now got the Skype for Business topology builder in play. We don't want that quite yet. Before we run topology builder, we have another step. We're deploying standard edition in this environment. As we talked about previously, topology builder publishes the topology to the central management store, and then it replicates out from there to other servers. If you're deploying Enterprise Edition, the central management store lives on the back-end SQL server. So if we deployed a topology with Enterprise Edition, we'd select the SQL server that was going to be our back-end, SQL's already there, and the central management store would be published to it. But because we're deploying Standard Edition server, and it's the first Standard Edition server, we have a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. The Skype for Business installer won't install SQL Express until we're installing the server, but we can't install the server without a central management store. So if you're deploying Standard Edition and it's the first server, we have prepare Standard Edition server. And what this is doing essentially is installing SQL Express on our first Standard Edition server. So when we then jump into Topology Builder, we have somewhere to publish the topology to before we come back and install the Skype for Business server bits for this Standard Edition server. You only have to run this step if you're deploying the very first Standard Edition server, and only if you're going Standard Edition. Once the first topology publish is done, the central management store has a home, so other Standard Edition servers can just read from that central management store location. You might notice the installer's made a couple of exceptions in the Windows firewall. These are just to give us access to the SQL instance. Okay, so now we've prepared Active Directory, installed our admin tools, and we prepared our first Standard Edition server. We're ready to jump into the Topology Builder. When we run Topology Builder, we've got three options. We can download the topology from the current deployment. open one from file if we pre-created one, or create a new one. Since we know we've got nothing to download, there is no deployment, we want a new topology. It'll ask you to save it to disk. At the moment we're just working locally in Topology Builder, we haven't published it to the central management store yet. So first question is our SIP domain. This is the domain suffix our users will have, i.e. user@domain.com. Domain.com would be the SIP address. Here we're Greenfield.com. Any additional domains, Skype for Business can support more than one domain. So if we had companies or subsidiaries with different names or even regional names, we could support them here. We're just going to go with a single domain for now. Now we want our site name and description for our very first site. So we're going to go with London and London site. And our city details, these are just for reference in the Topology Builder. And now we're ticked to define our first front-end pool. So click Finish, and here we are to define our first pool. We want standard edition, and our server name was seo1.greenfield.com. We now get to choose which of the Skype for Business features we want on our standard edition server. We want the ability to conference. We definitely want dial-in conferencing from the public switch telephony network, so the ability for people with normal phones to dial in. We want enterprise voice, that's the ability for our users to have real phone numbers and make and receive calls. Call admission control, that's the ability for Skype for Business to control how many concurrent calls there are from one location to another. And archiving and monitoring we'll leave off for now. If we want those in a standard edition, we need a dedicated SQL target to hold the monitoring and archiving data. We'll definitely co-locate our mediation role to support our enterprise voice and dial-in conferencing. And we're not going to set up an edge pool for now. You'll notice we don't have a choice of SQL Server. This is standard edition, so it's going to be SQL Express on the standard edition server. Now we have to define a file share. This is used for elements like meeting content and used as a drop space for Skype for Business to replicate data between servers. It's normal to put this in standard edition on the same server. So if we jump to our C drive of our standard edition server, I have an SFB share folder and I have to set it up for basic sharing. The Skype Business installer will add a bunch of other permissions to that share during the install process. And our external web services URL. So if we were to have an edge and reverse proxy, this would be the address the reverse proxy used. We'll just call it SEO1 web external for now. If we were to have an Office Web Apps pool, here's where we could define it and add it. And finally finish. So now you'll see our site is defined. We don't have any Lync 2010 or 2013 servers, obviously, because this is a new environment. And here is our Skype for Business Standard Edition server. So we don't stop here. Everything so far we've just defined locally. If we go up to the Skype for Business server to the top of the topology, we have the option to publish the topology. What this is telling us is that it's going to do a whole bunch of prereq checks as it publishes the topology. We want to choose where we want our central management store, and yes, we want it on SEO1. We prepped that earlier. So now the publishing wizard is going off and creating the central management store databases on that SQL Express. It's then pushing this XML config into the central management store. So now for the first time we have a central management store populated with our topology information. And there we go, all success, looks good. We're at a point now where we could deploy the bits for the standard edition server. But you'll see that next in the CCDD scenario. Patching Lync Server 2013. Even though this is a Skype for Business course, it's really important you understand how to patch Lync Server 2013. You've got to patch to current to do either a side-by-side or an in-place upgrade to Skype for Business. In this demo, we're going to install the latest cumulative update for Lync Server 2013. We're going to see how we check that the services have started up successfully after the patch. And we're going to install the database updates for Lync 2013, which is a critical part of the patching process but is often overlooked. So, onto the demo, patching Lync Server 2013 at CCDD Bank. The first thing we need to do for CCDD Bank before any Skype for Business upgrade or side-by-side migration is patch Lync Server 2013 up to current. The Lync and Skype team produce cumulative updates which apply to all the servers to upgrade them to current. Often with upgrades there's a minimum required cumulative update, but the best practice is just go to the latest and greatest. So just for our reference, here's SEO1, and if we have a look in the Lync 2013 Topology builder, we can see CCDD Bank's Topology, and we're on Lync 2013 SEO1 here. So how do we patch it up to current? Well, it's pretty simple really. First thing we do is, through our favourite search engine, look for Lync Server 2013 Cumulative Update. Microsoft provide these on download.microsoft.com, and they always host the latest cumulative update. Because they're cumulative, you don't need to apply patches one after the other. You just grab the latest and it contains all the previous patches. So after searching, you'll find the download, you'll find the version this is going to update you to, and the date it was published. And we can see here we have lots of different download options. We also have a knowledge base article. The knowledge base article has a bunch of detail around exactly what's been patched and why. Often it's useful to read through those and just understand what's being patched. In terms of download, if we go to the download, we see a number of options. The one you want is the Lync Server Update Installer. This has all the patches combined into one easy executable installer. You can download the individual MSPs, which are the patches for the MSIs, but it's best just to download the cumulative update installer. To save some time, I've already downloaded that. So here we are, C drive, Lync 2013 CU, and I've downloaded the update installer. Now, right click, run as administrator. Always ensure you have administrator rights on the server and you're a CS administrator in terms of Lync. And here's the update installer. As you can see, it's quite nice and visual. I can see all the components that are on my server. So the exe has checked which services I'm running and shows me that they're available. You can see my installed version in this case, which is 5083080, which is RTM. So I have RTM across all my services. And the update version in this pack is 508308920. You'll see here with this cumulative update, all the version numbers match. That's actually quite unusual. Quite often throughout the life of the product, you'll see these jump up in different numbers on different patches. But as Lync 2013 is no longer latest and greatest, the last CU leveled up all the version numbers, which is quite nice. And you see here, have I got the latest installed? No, I haven't. So, pretty easy really. I want to install the updates. Now bearing in mind this is a 2013 SE, installing the updates will stop the services, install the updates and start the services. So it is service impacting to the users. If I wanted to, I could move the users off this SE onto another one, or I can just accept that I've got an out of hours downtime window. So I'm out of hours, so I'm just going to click install updates. Now what's happening in the background is the update installer is actually unzipping all those MSPs into a folder and running through the install process for each one. So it makes it nice and easy for us. All we have to do is watch the individual MSPs get installed. The installer kicks off a command prompt window to show you how it's progressing. It's useful to watch that window to watch the progress. We can see as the patches go along, we're getting green ticks for the latest installed, and we're seeing the console window showing done, done, done. So easy to watch your progress. I'll accelerate the video a little so we don't just have to watch progress bars. So we've got nice clean dones all the way through the console log, and we can see that we've got green ticks on our latest installed. The update installer is now asking us to reboot. Yes, we would like to do that, so we'll reboot. But we're not quite finished yet. So while the cumulative update installer does a lot of the work for us, there are some database updates it doesn't do. And these are frequently missed on Lync patching, so you've got to really watch for them. They'll be flagged in the knowledge base, but they don't appear in every cumulative update, so you really have to read the knowledge base to understand. So we're in PowerShell as administrator and as a CS administrator. First, we're going to do the standard edition databases. So we do install CS database. We want configured databases, and confusingly, we have to put in the SQL Server FQDN. So since it's standard edition, our databases also live on the 2013 SE. So we're actually naming the SE because that's where the databases live. So 2013 SEO1 ccddbank.com, and we're going to do verbose so we can see what's happening. We get a nice log. Now note, this is also service impacting, so part of your service window you want to ensure you're doing this database update. Lots of info flies by. It is all logged at the file path shown at the top during the patch. So you can see here we're dropping tables in the Lync databases, so as we said, service impacting. So good news, we can see successfully installed the databases. So that all looks good. We also have our monitoring and archiving databases. And in this case, they're not on the standard edition server. You can't co-locate monitoring and archiving databases on the standard edition server. So we have them on a dedicated SQL server. And we need to patch the schema on those databases too. So we're going to do install CS database, configured databases, and this time we're actually pointing to the SQL server. Even though there's no Lync bits on that SQL server, it does contain these Lync databases. And you can see why this step's easily missed. People just run the cumulative update installer and either forget that there are Lync databases on non-Lync servers like shared SQL, or forget the database updates at all. They're really important to do to keep your Lync service running properly. Okay, good news. We've got successfully installed the databases. So we've done our cumulative updates, we've updated all the services, and we've updated all the databases. We would have to do that for all the other Lync servers in the environment, and after that we're ready for a Skype for Business upgrade. So we're back after our reboot, and there's two things to keep an eye on post-patching. So we'll have a look at how the services are starting up. Going into the services MSC. And if we click and press L to jump to the Lync servers, we can see we've got some services running and some services still waiting to start. That's not unusual. It takes a while for the Lync services to all start. The other place we want to look is Event Viewer, because if we are having any issues, Event Viewer is where we're going to find them. So on the SE, in the Application and Services log, we have a Lync Server log, and here we have events. It's not unusual to see some errors during startup. The services start at different rates, and they all talk to each other. So sometimes you'll see errors such as this service can't talk to that service. What we're really looking for is any that persist. And we're looking largely clean there. And let's have a look at our services. And we're still waiting on the front-end server to start. Okay, front-end server started, and the last service to start is the bandwidth policy service. And there we go. All nice and clean and running. That looks good. And if we refresh the event log, yeah, looks like we've got a largely clean event log. So good news, looks like the patch is applied. If we want to validate that, we can rerun the cumulative update installer. The nice thing is it will now do a check to verify all the version numbers again in a very visual way, so we can see what's going on. You notice it leaves logs behind for the install process. Those can be really useful for troubleshooting. So here we go, cumulative update installer, update version 920, installed version 920. And we see as we roll down, everything is nice and up to date. Deploying Skype for Business. Let's walk through the deployment steps. First, we have to install our server prerequisites and install the admin tools. Then we're ready to download the topology, make our updates and republish the topology. Once our topology has been updated and replicated, we're ready to do the server bits deployment. Once the server bits are deployed, we need to line up our TLS certificates for our new servers. Then we can start the services on the pool. And finally, we're ready to move a user across and test our first sign-in. Deploying Skype for Business 2015 Standard Edition, prerequisites and topology update and publish. So we're now on the first of the Skype for Business 2015 servers for CCDD, and we want to install Standard Edition. First thing we need to do is install some prereqs for this server. There's 4 main steps here. There's some server prerequisites we need to install. We need to patch a server with a particular hotfix. We want to install Silverlight, and we need to set up a file share for the Standard Edition server. If you go to your favourite search engine and type server requirements for Skype for Business, you'll hit the Microsoft TechNet page. That has a whole lot of information about hardware, and if we scroll down, it'll also give us the server requirements. Nicely, Microsoft have given us a PowerShell command to install all the server prerequisites in one go. We'll copy that command, jump into PowerShell, and run that command. What that's doing is using Add Windows feature in PowerShell to add all the features and services we need for our Skype for Business Standard Edition server. It's much easier than going through all the tick boxes. So here on my base server, I already had all the prerequisites in place, so no changes needed and we're good to go. Next, there's one particular hotfix we need that doesn't come down as a Windows update for Skype for Business server on Server 2012 R2. It's KB29820006, and it's actually a hotfix, so you have to put in your email address to be sent it rather than being able to download it straight away. Here's how you would download it. Tick the hotfix you want and then put your email in. I've already got it saved down to my disk, so I'm going to install that hotfix now. There we go. Next, we want to install Silverlight, and Microsoft linked to the right download from the Skype for Business prerequisites page. I've already installed Silverlight, so we're good to go on that front. Finally, we want to create a file share. The file share is required for the Standard Edition server. We're going to create a file share called SFB01 file share. We have to share that just to the administrator for now, And as the installer runs, it will customize those sharing permissions to be right for Skype for Business. So I've got the Skype for Business ISO saved on a network path. Just stick that in here. And so this is the ISO unpacked onto a network path. We go into Setup, AMD64, and Setup. And you'll notice that the installer's noticed we haven't got C++, so it's installed that. Here we have the new addition since Lync 2013 to Skype for Business, the check for updates. At time of recording, there are no updates available online, so I'm going to skip that section right now. But in the future, when you install, it's worth keeping that ticked and checking Windows Update for updates. And we see here the install location. This is important to catch if you want to install on something other than your C drive. Say you have a D drive for apps, you need to choose it here, otherwise your install will filter through all to the C drive. We're going to leave it C for now. So first thing, standard end user license agreement, obviously read it really carefully, everybody does. And now you'll notice we're installing the core components. So these are required just to get up and going with Topology Builder and with the core install. Okay, so core components are installed and we now have the Lync Server deployment wizard installed on our server. Now you'll notice it already knows that Active Directory is prepared because we've installed Lync 2013 previously in this environment. So whereas in the Greenfield install we had to prepare Active Directory, here we've already got it done. We've got an option to install or update Skype for Business, but we can't install or update until we've added it to our topology. So the first thing we want to do is install the administrative tools. Just next through this. This is installing the admin tools, but the Skype for Business version of the admin tools. We had to install these on a fresh server. You can't install them alongside the Lync Server 2013 admin tools. But since we're installing a new Skype for Business server, it's no problem. We install them on here anyway. You notice the installer is quite nice. It gives you lots of detail about what it's doing and what its requirements are. So if it ever gets stuck or you have issues, you've got a nice visual way to see what's going on. And all that information is also dumped out to text logs. So it's pretty user friendly. Okay, so we're all done. We've got complete. We've noticed that it's installed the admin tools MSI. No database discovered and no roles discovered. So all we've got is the admin tools. And you see here a nice tick for admin tools. You'll notice prepare first standard edition server. We've got to remember that this isn't the first standard edition server. It's the first Skype for Business standard edition server, but it's not the first standard edition server in the environment. So we don't need to host CMS. We've already got CMS hosted, the Central Management Store, on Lync 2013. And my account is already a CS administrator, so I don't need to worry about that. So we can jump out of here now and go to Start, and we're into Topology Builder. Notice Skype for Business Topology Builder. And we're going to download the topology. This is working exactly the same way as Lync Server 2013. It's going off to AD, looking for a pointer to see where the central management store is, and then it's downloading the topology XML. And we're saving a local copy, and it should look pretty familiar. If we expand out, same site, we've got Lync 2010, Lync 2013, our two standard edition servers in our CCDD bank environment. But you'll notice we now have Skype for Business, and we have no other servers at the moment in the environment. So we want to add our first front-end pool. We're adding a new standard edition server. and we add our FQDN, which is 2015 SC01 ccddbank.com. Next, we have our option to select which features and roles are installed on our Skype Business Standard Edition server. We definitely want conferencing and we want the ability to dial in. We absolutely want enterprise voice. You'll notice call admission control is not ticked. That already lives on Lync 2013 server, and Skype Business is clever enough to know in the environment that already exists, so we can't add it here too. We can later move it to Skype for Business from Lync 2013 if we want to decom 2013. Archiving and monitoring, we're not going to add those now, we'll add those later. We definitely want to co-locate Mediation Server. That's our ability to do PSTN calls and connect to gateways. And we're not going to add an edge server now, we're going to add that later. For SQL Server, it's a standard edition, so we're going to have SQL Express co-locate the RTC database on the front end. And we're not going to do any kind of mirroring because there's no mirroring for SQL in standard edition. Now we're being asked for our file share. So this is the share we created earlier. It's on our standard edition server. You could put it on a different file server if you wanted to, but it's pretty typical for standard edition to stick it on the same server. So it's SFB01 file share. And next. And our external base URL. So this is weirdly worded, but this is referring to the reverse proxy address. This is the address that a reverse proxy user, an external web user, would hit. We're going to change that slightly. We're going to call it SFB-RP01. So Skype for Business reverse proxy 01, so we know which one it is. That doesn't mean it's setting the reverse proxy up, that's just the address the reverse proxy should listen to. Office Web App Server, that's what encodes our PowerPoint. We're not going to have an Office Web App Server for now, so we'll untick that. And here we go. So now we have our standard edition server for under Skype for Business ready to go. We haven't configured any gateways or any edge or any external dependencies yet. We'll come to those later. We're now ready to publish the topology. So if we right click at the top and go to Topology and Publish, we get a bunch of information about publishing the topology. Essentially, it's going to check through our settings and make sure they don't clash with anything in the environment. This is a really nice way to manage a global environment. It's all this central management store XML file, which means the server you're installing knows about all the other servers, and it ensures that it's not clashing in terms of settings or policies or roles between other servers. And there we go. So we've got all success. So we've now published our topology, we've downloaded our topology, checked it, checked all the URLs and enabled. So from here on forward, our topology is now a Skype for Business topology, which means we can only administer it from the Skype Business Topology Builder. So we've now got our topology published. The topology knows about our new Skype for Business Standard Edition server, but how do we actually get the server installed? Back to the Start menu, and you'll remember we saw the deployment tools being installed earlier. So if we go into the Skype for Business Deployment Wizard, now we're at a point where we're ready on the Standard Edition server to install or update Skype for Business Server. First step is to install the local configuration store. I'm going to run that. You'll notice here it's saying, do you want me to go and retrieve a topology from the central management store, or do you want to import from a file? We only ever really need to import from a file for edge servers, as it says. We're going to retrieve from the central management store. This is now getting the XML file from the central management store, and it's copying it to a local SQL server instance. Each Lync server has an RTC local instance, and that holds a local copy of the topology, so it knows what's going on in the global environment. At this point, the installer is installing SQL Express onto this server. That can take some time, between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on the install. Okay, looks all good. And we can just verify that if we go into services. We should see a SQL RTC local instance, and there we go. So that's up and running now, which is good. Okay, so we finished there. At each stage, the deployment wizard updates to check state, and we can see complete. This part of the install is actually looking at the topology and then installing the relevant binaries for this server's role. This can take up to 15-20 minutes, so we'll jump from here to the finish. Okay, so the setup for server components is now complete. And if we have a look in our services, we should be able to see a number of Skype business services. And indeed we can. So now we're at the stage where we just need to assign certificates to our server before we can start the services and test. And we'll see that in the next module. Setting up server certificates and starting the services and testing sign-in. So far we've installed all our services on the server, but we can't start them without certificates. Everything on Skype Business is secure by TLS or mutual TLS, so we need to set some certificates for those services to start. We're going to go into the certificate wizard in Skype Business. The deployment wizard gives us a really nice certificate wizard to make things nice and easy. You'll notice the OAuth token issuer certificate is already set. That's a global certificate shared between all the Skype Business servers. And since we had Lync 2013, those servers already had an OAuth cert set, and that gets copied across to the Skype Business servers. So we don't need to set that. But we do need to set a certificate for our server, and our web services for internal users, and our web services for external users. So we click on that and head to request. This certificate wizard is slightly different to how it was in Lync Server 2013. Nicely, it's all been put onto less pages to click through. So the certificate wizard immediately notices that we've got a root CA on AD01. That's my internal CA. And since we're deploying an internal certificate, we'll use that. It's given it a default friendly name, and we need to put in our org and an organizational unit, our country, and we can choose selective SIP domains or all SIP domains. We're going to go with all. Our subject name is the same as the server name for a standard edition server, and it's already set our subject alternate names as we'd expect. There is an advanced option to go in and set more names, but for this install the wizard's got it right. We've got everything we need. We don't need any additions, so we can do it in just one page. We get a confirmation of what we've asked for and the names we've set. And as I click next, this is going off to the certificate authority to request a certificate. And there we go, we're complete. A certificate's been added to the local certificate store, and we've already got pre-ticked, do we want to assign it? Yes, we do. So if we click finish, the assignment wizard will come up. We know which certificate we've got, click next. Again, we have the option to confirm the details. And now it's taking that certificate and assigning it to the services. And now we see we've got nice green ticks everywhere. All the services are sharing a single certificate in terms of the server, the web service is internal and the web service is external, and our OAuth certificate is set. Now we're ready to start our services. In Lync Server 2013 deployment wizard, you would expect a button here to start the services. But now there's a new start CS pool commandlet. The deployment wizard is actually pointing us to PowerShell, which is always the best way to do things anyway. So let's jump into PowerShell. and we'll do start CS pool FUDN 2015 SEO1 ccddbank.com, and we'll do for both to see what's going on. Just warning us that we should make sure that all the servers in the pool are ready. And here we go. We get a nice visual of what's going on while we start the services. It will usually take a while for a pool to start, so we'll speed through some of this. And there we go, we get to final state of running. And we can easily check that with get CS Windows service. And we can see, yes, all our services are running, so we're looking good. So we have services up and running, that looks good. It's time to test if our server's really working. If we head into the Skype for Business control panel, what's popping up now is an option of all the different servers we can connect to. We'll connect to our 2015 SEO1. What you're seeing is an Internet Explorer frame to a Silverlight website basically. And we can see we're on the Skype for Business server. If we go to users, well, at the moment we've only got one Tom Test user on 2013 SEO1. So Tom Test is still on the old pool. Let's move him across the Skype for Business. Select him and move selected users to pool. And we're going to choose our first standard edition. We don't want to force. Force will move the user without taking their contact list or their previously scheduled conferences. Quite often we see people ticking force thinking it somehow makes things faster, but in Skype for Business it's rarely what you want. We click OK. And now we see Tom Test is over to 2015 SEO1. So let's sign him in and see if it's all working. Here we are in the Skype for Business client. For the sake of the demo, I've installed Office directly on one of the servers. Normally, obviously, this would be a client PC. And we're going to try and sign in. Yes, we'll let Skype for Business save our sign-in details. And we're in, looking good. We've definitely signed in. How can we check we're on the right server? In the taskbar, if we press Control and right click, we have configuration information, a hidden menu. And we can see here that yes, our server is all pointing to the 2015 SEO1. All looks good. Looks like we're ready to go with our new pool. Installing Edge Server. In this module, we're going to cover installing the Skype for Business Edge Server at ccddbank. Edge Server deployment. There's quite a lot to the Edge Server deployment. The Edge Server has an internal network interface and an external network interface. So it's kind of bridging the inside world and the outside world. On the inside, we need a NIC with a single IP address that's routable to the inside network. And on the outside, we need a NIC with preferably 3 public IP addresses, and they're to run different services on the outside interface. There's likely to be a firewall on the outside and on the inside, between the corporate network and the inside edge, and between the outside world and the outside edge interface. So we need to make sure we get all our firewall rules lined up. There's lots of DNS requirements. There are DNS records on the public DNS to allow external people to find the Edge server. There are DNS requirements on the inside network to allow the inside network to find the Edge server. And remember, the Edge server is not domain joined, so we have to manually set these DNS requirements. Also, the Edge server typically is looking at an external DNS server, so it can discover records in the outside world. So we need to set some host file records to set DNS for our internal network, so it can find the inside Skype for Business pools. And certificate requirements. Plenty of certificates in play here as well. We've got an internal interface certificate to let Skype for Business Edge talk to the inside network. And we've got public certificate requirements on the outside to let the outside world connect to the edge. The public certificate has to come from a public certificate authority that's trusted, and the inside certificate typically comes from our internal certificate authority. Alongside the edge server, we have the reverse proxy. The reverse proxy is publishing web services from the internal pools to the outside world. The edge server and the reverse proxy kind of go hand in hand. Edge does all our SIP and media, and reverse proxy does all our HTTPS web traffic. You can't really have one without the other, and for full service you certainly need both. So let's dive into the edge server topology. Here's a reference diagram from Microsoft of all the edge server ports and protocols. Looks pretty complicated, I think you'll agree, but let's break it down. So on the right hand side we have the internal network, and we have the internal edge interface, which also has the AV authentication service, and you can see all the different traffic types that hit that internal interface. You've got the centralized logging service, XMPP if you use it, which is another messaging protocol alongside SIP. We've got our SIP traffic, our PSOM, persistent object model, stun, and HTTPS for topology replication. So lots going on between the inside network and that inside interface. On the outside we've got 3 IP addresses. We've got our access edge, our web conferencing edge, and our AV edge. Access edge is basically for signing in the SIP. Web conferencing edge is for that persistent object model for web conferencing. And the AV edge is for audio and video over edge. You can run those 3 public edge services on one IP with different ports, but the strong preference is to have 3 public IPs and have them all running on the 443 port. That way, if anybody's connecting from the outside world from a limited connection, they can usually get out over 443 and hit all 3 services. If you put the services on 443, 444, 445, for example, it might well be they can't get to 444 or 445 and therefore have limited service. So really strongly recommended to have 3 public IPs per edge server. Jumping to the reverse proxy, we're not really going to a demo deployment of this because it varies so widely from reverse proxy to reverse proxy. Any reverse proxy will do. What the reverse proxy does is provides a security demarc between the outside world and the inside world for web services. So if I click meet or dial in from the outside world, or I'm connected to web services for a meeting, I'm going to go through the reverse proxy on HTTPS, and the reverse proxy is going to flip that traffic and send it to IIS on the link pool on 4443. You'll notice you see HTTP and HTTP 8080. All that's for is if you want people to be redirected from HTTP to HTTPS. So for example, if they type dialin.ccdd.com in a web browser looking for our dial-in numbers, and they forgot to put HTTPS, they could go all the way into the network and be told to redirect to HTTPS. Most people don't deploy that. They just assume that you're clicking the link so it's HTTPS, or they'll put a redirect on the reverse proxy and not have it go all the way into the network only to be redirected. It's worth noting that the mobile clients use HTTPS now as their preferred signaling method. HTTPS is a bit more robust on lossy networks and intermittent connectivity as opposed to SIP over the edge. They still use the edge server for media, but the reverse proxy is their route for signaling. So quite an important role. DNS and certificates. With all these services over edge and all being secure, DNS and certificates gets quite interesting. We'll go over typical record requirements. First off, the internal edge interface. This one's nice and easy. The pool needs to talk to the edge and the edge needs to talk to the pool. So we just have edge01.ccddbank.com. Note as this server is not domain joined, we have to add it to the internal DNS manually. And on the edge server, since it's pointing to the external world for its DNS lookups, we need to add a host file to let it find the local pool. Next, the public edge interface. This is running all those services and each one of them has a record. SIP.dot, Access, Web Conferencing and AV all have records. SIP.dot and ACO1 could be the same name, but it's good to split them out for flexibility as you scale. Then we have 2 service records. SIP TLS and SIP Federation TLS. They're to allow external parties to find the edge. So SIP TLS for clients and SIP Federation TLS for other edge servers looking to federate. Then we have our public reverse proxy DNS. You'll notice we've got web service records for both our 2015 pools, SFB RPO1 and SFB RPO2. Even though we're deploying a single edge server at CCDD Bank, users from both pools can leverage the same edge. So we have to publish the web services for both pools. Those records need to route back to their respective pool on 4443. We also have meet and dial in. Meet is for people who click links to join meetings from the outside world, and dial in is if they want to look up a number. On the certificate side, the Edge internal interface, as you'd expect, it's the same single name. That allows TLS connectivity between the inside edge and the inside network. On the public edge, we've got SIP, Access and WebConf. You'll notice AV01 is actually missing. While audio video is encrypted, the name's not required in the TLS cert. It takes the key from the cert anyway. Finally, we've got the public reverse proxy. We're serving web services for each of those records, so we need a certificate that has each of those records in. As you can see, quite a lot of records to line up, and considerations for both public certificates and public DNS out on the internet, and internal certificates and internal DNS. Edge server deployment steps. First, we're going to set up our server, get our NICs lined up. We're going to set up our DNS and our host files. We're then actually able to deploy the Edge server bits. Then we need to set up our public and our private certificates. We're now ready to start the services. Then we can check our CMS replication and test user sign-in. Demo, Skype for Business Edge server deployment. Here we are on 2015 Edge 01, and now we're going to go through the steps to prepare this server to be an Edge server. So first things first, server prerequisites. Well, if we hit our favourite search engine and look for server requirements for Skype for Business, you'll notice after we get down the hardware requirements, there's software that should be installed for all servers. And it's quite light. We've got PowerShell 3, .NET Framework 4.5, Windows Identity Foundation, and they also list the RSAT tools, the Remote Server Administration tools. We don't really need those for Edge because we're not going to be remote administrating our servers from the Edge server, but we do need the others. PowerShell obviously comes with Windows, so just .NET Framework and Windows Identity Foundation. Quickest way to install those is PowerShell. So jump to our PowerShell console, and we want just those two features. Add Windows feature, .NET Framework and Windows Identity Foundation. And we're all good there. We've clearly got those roles both installed. We don't need a restart, so we're good to go on the prereqs. Next, we're going to set up the networking. If we go into Control Panel on Networks, you'll see we've set up two interfaces. We've got an internal interface and an external interface. Our internal is facing the inside network, and our external is facing the internet. Internal's pretty easy. One IP address, 192.168.194. And you'll notice we've got default gateway and DNS. We don't really want our default route pointing inside, so we're going to have to fix that. And then external. We've got a public IP address on this network. And you'll notice we've got one IP here, and if we go to advanced, we've got two more through the add button. So we've got 92.33.33.6, 7 and 8, and they're going to be the three IPs for our services. Now what we want on this server is for the default route to be out to the internet, not to the internal network. However, we do want some traffic to be able to route to our internal servers and users. So how do we achieve that? Well, what we're going to do is create the default route to be external through the external NIC, and then have a static route to the internal networks. My network is pretty simple. I've got one subnet on the inside. So what I'm going to do is add a static route, -p makes it persistent, and it's going to be anything on the 192.168.1.0 network with a 24-bit subnet mask will go to this default gateway, 192.168.1.254. Once I add that static route, it's going to stay in the Windows networking. And we can check it's there with route print. You can see we've got a persistent route to 192.168.1.0. Now we've got that route set, we can change our default gateway. Go back to networks. What we're going to do is set the external network, and the default gateway for that is 92.33.33.1, and we already have our DNS set to an external DNS. I click OK and you'll notice it's warning me I've got multiple default gateways, and that's not a normal configuration. That's fine. So here's the moment of truth. We're going to take away our default route to our inside network. So we're going to take away that route and take away that DNS server. So now all my default route traffic will go out through the internet NIC, and all my DNS requests will go out through the internet NIC. OK those, and we're looking good. We've still got connectivity, and let's just double check. Our default gateway is now out of 92.33.33.1, and our internal NIC has no default gateway associated with it. If I come over here, I can see my default persistent route has stuck. You've got to be really careful about those steps and which order you do them in. If you remove your default route to the inside network and you're connecting from the inside network, you could cut yourself off away from the server. Ideally, if you're setting up an edge server, it's nice to do it from the console, or if you're doing it in a virtualization environment, to console onto the server, so you're not relying on the network connectivity during this phase. But if you line the steps up right, you should be fine too. So we set our prerequisites, and now we've set our routing up correctly. Next step is the hostname. The server is a workgroup server, and we're not going to domain join it. The edge role lives in the DMZ, and so for security reasons it's not domain joined. But what we do need to do is go to change the DNS, and we're going to set a DNS suffix, and it's ccddbank.com. So even though it's not domain joined, the server is going to identify as 2015 edge 01 ccddbank.com. That's important when it comes to the topology, and the server's looking for its name in topology. This requires a restart. While the edge server's restarting, I've jumped back to the internal network and onto the AD server. ADs also are DNS for ccddbank, and here we can see the internal DNS. So we've got our SEs, and we've got our SIP and our meter and dial-in, and they're all still pointing to the 2013 SE at this stage. Now the internal servers need a way to find the edge server, and because the edge server is not domain joined, we need to add a manual host record. So we're going to add 2015 edge 01. Great. So now the internal servers, if they look up 2015 edge 01 ccddbank.com, they'll be able to find the server. But what about the edge server? We've got to solve the problem in reverse. So we've already pointed the edge server's DNS out to the internet, but obviously the internet's not going to know about our internal server names. What I've done here is grabbed the internal server names the edge server might need to communicate with, so all the other pools, and their IP addresses. And what we can do is stick this in the edge server's host file. Back on the Edge server now after the reboot, and we want to set up the host file. We'll run Notepad as administrator. The host file is a file on the server that's looked at even before the server goes to DNS. So it supersedes DNS. It's held in Windows, System32, drivers, etc. And it's just a text file. If we go to all files, we can see it here. So I'll take those records that I copied from the internal DNS, paste them into the host file, IP and then name, and save. And what we should find, if our firewalling and networking is all lined up, is that we can ping those servers. Yeah, looks good. Now, even though we're not domain joined, we can still resolve those servers, which is great. Okay, so that's all our prep for our Edge server. Our networking's ready, our prereqs are in place. It's time to jump over to Topology Builder. We're back on 2015 SE01 and we've launched the Skype for Business Topology Builder. And we want to add a new edge pool. Just like front-end pools, we refer to edges as pools, whether they're a single server or multiple. We're doing a single server pool, and we want 2015 Edge01 ccddbank.com. We're going to enable federation. That's the ability to talk to other people with Lync and Skype for Business. And we're going to tick Skype to Skype federation. That allows Skype for Business to connect with Skype consumer accounts and search for Skype consumer accounts. And we're not going to enable XMPP. XMPP is another type of federation that's used occasionally but not very often. It's not really core to Skype for Business, it's more about interop with other environments. You'll note here we've got the option of using a single IP address and FQDM for the Edge server. As we discussed, we don't really want to use a single IP. We want 3 different public IPs for our Edge server, so we can run all the services on 443. We're going to use IPv4, not IPv6. And our Edge server has public IPs directly on the server. If we wanted to, we could use network address translation through a firewall and have the public IP sit on the firewall and have dummy internal IP addresses on the outside NIC of the Edge. But in this case, we're not using that. Okay, so our DNS records. We're going to use AC01 for our access edge, WCO1 for our web conferencing edge, and AV01 for our audio video edge. You can use any names you like, but it's good to have a naming convention as your environment grows. Now we need to define the internal IP address and the public IP addresses we put on the public NIC earlier. It's really important all these IPs and DNS names line up with what we've set on the server. If they don't, the Topology Builder won't deploy the bits for us. We're going to set our next hot pool as one of the 2015 servers. This is the pool the traffic will go to after the Edge server. So it will always come into the Edge server, then jump to the 2015 SE01. Now we get to define which pool use our Edge server. More than one pool can use an Edge server, so even though we're deploying one, we can serve more than one pool. We're only giving external connectivity to our 2015 pools, so we're going to stick with those. And generally you wouldn't want to align a new Skype for Business Edge with an old 2013 pool. You tend to go inside out for upgrades. So we're going to stick with the 2 2015 servers. Okay, so our server's nicely defined in topology. It's worth double checking all these records. Looks like all our IPs are lined up correctly. We're all on 443. So we're ready to publish the topology. All looks good. Now we've got a bit of a challenge. That topology is replicating around our internal system, and we can check that and see it's replicating around. But obviously it can't replicate to the Edge server because the Edge server isn't installed yet. And the edge server can't get to the internal network to find the management store because it doesn't know where to look yet. It can't look at AD to find that pointer. So how do we get the topology to the edge server? The answer is we have to export it and copy it over manually. So if we do export CS configuration as a file, and we'll do topology.zip, and there we go. We've now copied that topology into a zip file. So here's our topology, and for the next step we're going to copy that over to the edge server. Back on our edge server, and I've copied that topology zip file over to the desktop of the edge server. Now we're ready to install the bits. I've got the Skype for Business install on a file share, and we're going to run it. You'll notice the deployment wizard can't check Active Directory because we're not domain joined, but we want to go straight to install or upgrade. First thing we're going to do is install our local configuration management store. You'll notice the installer knows we're not domain joined and is saying, I can't retrieve directly from the central management store. Recommend you import a file, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Now the installer is going to take that file, install our local SQL instance, and copy that topology to the local management store. You'll notice here it's importing the CS configuration from our file on the desktop. There we go, complete, all looks good. Now we have a local configuration store, we can add our components. So what the installer will do is check the local configuration store for our server name and install the relevant roles. Okay, looks like our roles installed nicely. Now we're on to certificates. Certificates are a little more complicated for the edge server role, because again, we're not domain joined and we also need public certificates for the external network. Edge internal first, that's relatively easy. We'll do request. We have the option to send the request immediately, but there's no direct connectivity between our DMZ and our internal certificate authority. So instead we're going to prepare the request and copy it across. It's asking us for a local file name for the request, and we'll call it internal request. We're happy with the standard template. Standard Freddy name is fine. We usually want to make our private key exportable so we can back up and move the certificate if required. Fill in the usual details. As we said earlier, we only need the subject name 2015 Edge 01. We don't need any subject alternate names. And here's our request. And there's our request on the desktop. Now we need to take that to the internal certificate authority and get it signed. I'm going to copy that over to the inside network. Here we are back on AD01, which is also our internal certificate authority. We have our request copied to the desktop. If we go to all tasks and submit new request, choose our request, and it's asking us to output the certificate. We'll also put that to the desktop, internal edge. There we go, there's our certificate issued. Remembering that our edge server is not domain joined, it's not going to trust this certificate by default. It doesn't have the internal route from this certificate authority, so we need to copy it across. We can do this from any server. If we go to MMC, add remove snap-in, certificates, we want the local computer, and if we go to trusted root certificates, we can see our root. Let's just check that's the right one. Yep, this is our root for CCDD Bank. So we want to export the root. and we'll copy it to the desktop as well. So now we have the Edge certificate and we can trust the root that signed it. We're going to take those both back over to the Edge server. Back on the Edge server, I have the root I want to trust and the internal Edge certificate. First, we're going to import the root. Again, MMC, certificates, local computer. And we want to go to trusted roots and all tasks, import local machine, and we want the root. So this is adding that enterprise root to our trusted certificate authorities. And there we go, we now have that root. So if we look at this certificate, we should now trust it. Yep, we trust the root, therefore we trust this certificate. Now we can import that certificate. Since we created the request on this machine, we don't need to import the private key from the cert. That's the certificate imported. Now if we go to assign, we can see that certificate. And that's our internal edge assigned. Now our external certificate. Same process, we want to prepare it offline, but this time we're going to be sending it to a public certificate authority. We'll cut the friendly name down because sometimes external certificate authorities don't like the long name. We definitely want the private key exportable. And our same details are saved from before. When you're dealing with an external certificate authority, a public one like DigiCert or VeriSign, be sure to line up all your details correctly with what you have on record with that organisation. They'll want your organisation name to exactly match what they have on record. So if you're CCD Bank Limited versus CCD Bank Inc., that might matter when issuing a cert. They'll only issue to what they've got on record. We see our subject names, our access and our webconf, remembering that AV doesn't need to be in the cert. We want all our SIP domains, so that will add sip.ccddbank.com, and we don't have any additional SANs to add. Let's just check our names. Yep, we've got access, SIP and webconf, all good. And complete. So now we need to take this external request and push it off to an external certificate provider. Usually they have web-based portals, and if you open this up, you'll see it's encoded in a format that you can copy and paste into a website form to submit. That's usually how it works. Sometimes they'll turn them around straight away. Sometimes it can take a few days. It really depends on who you're dealing with and how often they issue certs to you. Through the Magic of Plural site, I've now got my Edge Public cert signed, back from my provider, and I'm ready to import it. Edge Public. And assign. There's my Edge Public. And it's imported and assigned. And you can see I've cheated, I've signed it with my internal root cert, but obviously if you were doing this properly, it would be going out to an external certificate provider and it would have their name here. So all good, we have fully trusted certs. Next thing, we want to start the services. So we'll go into PowerShell and we'll do a start CS Windows service. And if we jump into services MSC, we can check that. All our edge services are up and running. Looking good. Next thing to check is that the topology is replicating between the edge server and the internal environment. So let's jump back to our standard edition server. Back on the standard edition server, you can see where we left off, where we first checked and there was no replication for the edge server, and we exported our topology. Let's check again. And good news. The edge server is now replicating, it's up to date, and it's got the latest version. We've got one more thing to do before we can test our edge server. Even though we've deployed it, it's not actually enabled by default. If we go to the Skype server control panel, then we go to Federation and External Access. You'll notice our global external access policy isn't yet enabled. So we're going to enable Federation, enable remote connectivity, and enable public connectivity. And then on the access edge configuration, we need to do the same thing. We'll enable Federation and public IM, enable discovery, we don't need a disclaimer for archiving. We'll enable remote user access, and we're going to enable anonymous join to conferences. And those two policies, once they've replicated, will put our edge into play. Great, next step would be to check we can sign in from external on mobile and PC clients. And just a tip as well, if you search for Remote Connectivity Analyzer, that's a Microsoft website that will let you test your edge server. It's still branded Lync, but it will work for Skype for Business. And you can put in credentials and test your connectivity to your edge server. It's a really handy tool. So that's our edge server up and working. Pool pairing, monitoring, archiving, and enterprise voice. In this module, we're going to continue with CCDD Bank. We're going to set up pool pairing between the two new Skype for Business Standard Edition servers. We're then going to install the monitoring and archiving databases. We're going to take the opportunity to demo basic enterprise voice setup. And finally, in this module, we're going to quickly go through some Lync Server 2013 decommissioning tips, which is where CCDD Bank would ultimately go to decom their Lync 2013 deployment. Demo, pool pairing of CCDD Bank. We left the last module having deployed our first Skype for Business Standard Edition server at CCDD Bank. We deployed it and signed in the first user, so we knew it was working. Since that module, I've gone ahead and installed a second Standard Edition server in exactly the same way. So now at our CCDD Bank topology, we can see under Skype for Business 2015, we have two Standard Edition servers up and running. We still have our Lync Standard Edition servers in play, and at this point we'd expect most of our users still to be on the Lync Standard Edition servers. Our next step, now we've got two Standard Edition 2015 servers up and running, is to set up pool pairing. Pool pairing is the ability for one pool to be a backup pool for another. It's the backup registrar for basic voice services and automatic failover, and also key user data is replicated between the pools. So in the event one fails, users can fail over to the other pool and still have their buddy list, their previous conferences, etc. This is not set up automatically when you install two pools. We have to set it up in Topology. So we'll start here and go to Edit Properties on our first pool. If we go to Resiliency, you can see at the moment we've got nothing ticked. And we're going to associate a backup pool. Now you can only pair like versions with like versions, so standard with standard, enterprise with enterprise, and 2013 with 2013, 2015 with 2015. So we're going to pair with our 2015 SEO2. Pairing doesn't automatically set up failover for voice, we want that as well. So setting a backup pool will cause the data to replicate, but still require a manual failover. If we tick automatic failover for voice, if the first pool should fail, users will automatically fail over for basic voice services. So they'll still be able to make and receive calls. There's still some manual PowerShell steps to do a full failover, but at least they have that automatic failover for their voice services. And we'll leave the defaults of 300 seconds for failover detection and 600 for failback. You can take those up or down as you want in your environment. So we've chosen SEO2 to go with pool 1, and we'll click OK. You'll notice that SEO2 has automatically set SEO1 as its pair. The pair relationship is two-way and it must be a pair. It's a one-to-one relationship between two pools. Okay, so we've set it in Topology. Remembering that now we've got Skype for Business servers in play, we can only use Skype for Business Topology Builder. Let's publish that topology. All looks good, success. Something that often gets missed though is this next steps. If we click here to open, you'll notice that it's telling us we need to make some additional steps. Really easy to miss that, and people often miss it during a deployment. Topology Builder is telling us that changes have been made to these two servers in the environment, and that we also need to invoke CS Backup Sync to ensure the conferencing data is replicated. Now, it's not the most clear from that message, but essentially what's happened is we've added a responsibility to those two servers to replicate data from each other. And because that wasn't set in the topology before, we need a new service to do that replication. So on SEO1, we're going to rerun the deployment wizard. What this is going to do is take a look again at the latest topology and ensure that all the roles are installed that are needed for this server. You'll notice it's installing a new backup service. That's the service responsible for replicating the data between one pool and another. Okay, looks good. Let's check that service is there. Yeah, there's our new backup service, and we'll start it. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing on SEO2. I've done SEO2 in the background, so both have the backup service running. Now we're ready to invoke our sync. We can just copy paste the command from the output of the topology builder. I'm going to add verbose so I can see what's going on. Yes, we realise the sync might be heavy. It shouldn't be in our environment as we don't have many users. And we can see there's no CMS, Central Management Store, but that's fine because we've got that on the 2013 pools at present. And we're going to do the same thing here. And again, no errors, looks good. Let's just check the event log. If we look for backup service events, we can see all looks good. So our pools are paired and replicating data between each other. Monitoring and archiving deployment. At CCDD Bank, we're going to deploy a new monitoring and archiving database. To do this, we need a topology change, we need a new SQL Server target, and then we need to deploy the SQL reports for Skype for Business Server 2015. We're on CCDD Bank's Skype for Business 2015 SEO1. If we jump into Topology Builder, if we look at the 2013 environment, we'll notice there's an archiving and monitoring store for the 2013 servers, 2013 SQL 01. We want monitoring and archiving for our Skype for Business environment, but per CCDD Bank's IT policies, we're not going to do an in-place upgrade for the existing SQL monitoring and archiving store. So how do we deploy a new monitoring and archiving store for Skype for Business? It's fairly straightforward. If we edit the properties for 2015 SEO1, we'll notice there's no archiving or monitoring. If we look at the drop down, we can't choose our 2013 monitoring and archiving store. The archiving store and monitoring store are compatible backward, so the Skype for Business schema can be used by a 2013 pool if it's CU5 or higher, latest recommended obviously, but a Skype for Business pool can't use a legacy 2013 schema archiving and monitoring database. In this case we're deploying a new one. So our new SQL Server name is 2015 SQL 01. And we're going to use the same for monitoring. You notice now it's available because we defined it up here. So we'll set that for SEO1 and we'll set the same for SEO2. We're not setting up any kind of mirroring, but if we were, this is where we could define it. Okay, and if we publish that topology, what will happen is the topology builder will push out to that new SQL server and it's going to automatically create the databases for us, which is what we want. All looks good. It's created our LCS CDR database, our LCS log database, and our QoE metrics database. There is a warning here, so let's take a look at the log. This is a fairly common warning, so it's a good one to see. It's telling me that the SQL Server agent is not running automatically. So I need to jump onto my SQL Server and set SQL Server agent for that instance to automatic. Useful, the topology builder checks things like this for us. So we've got our databases and our servers are automatically going to learn from the topology replication that they should be doing monitoring and archiving to those databases. But what about reporting? Well, for reporting we use SQL reporting services. So we need to deploy our reports. We head into the deployment wizard and you'll notice one of our options on the right is deploy monitoring reports. Now as we click that, the deployment wizard is actually checking the topology and making an estimate at where we want to deploy these to. And it's got it right. It's the monitoring database here and it's the SQL reporting instance on the same database. The deployment wizard is asking us for a service account that the SQL reporting services can use to read the data out of the database. It has to be in the domain/username format. It's best to use a dedicated service account for this, and it needs access to that SQL server to get to the report data. Now it's asking us for a group of users who are allowed to read the reports, and it handily sets us up a nice group by default, so we're going to use that. RTC universal read only admins. You can use that group or use your own if you prefer. Now the deployment wizard is going off to that reporting services instance on 2015 SQL 01 and deploying our reports. Note that SQL reporting services has to be installed on that SQL server and the basic SQL reporting services configured. There go our reports getting installed. Looks good, all completed. And you'll notice it's given us the URL in the results to hit the reporting server. So we're going to copy that, finish here, and take a look. Now because I'm a CS administrator, I have access to SQL reporting services. I inherit that RTC universal read-only admins group. and looks good. So we're going to the reporting server on 2015 SQL 01, and you can see here are my various Skype for Business reports. Obviously not much going on in this environment yet, but when the environment's up and running, there's a ton of value in these reports. So there we go, we've deployed our monitoring and archiving database for 2015, and we've deployed the SQL reports for Skype for Business. Basic enterprise voice setup. In Skype for Business, enterprise voice is the ability for our users to make and receive telephone calls. To give our users this ability, we need to configure it, and we also need to control their access. So how do we set up enterprise voice? Well, to understand the setup, it's best to go outside from the telephone network inside to the user. So we start at the PSTN network. That's the public switch telephony network. That's the global network for phones. So when you're making and receiving a call with a telephone number anywhere around the world, you're connecting onto the PSTN. And that's a network that interconnects many different providers. So for our Skype for Business system to connect to that network, we need a gateway or a session border controller. Those are devices that sit between our Skype for Business infrastructure and connect us to a telephone provider. Gateways can connect us to various telephony network standards all over the world, and session border controllers are IP based. They tend to use SIP. One of those two devices, either physical or virtual, connects us to our telephone network. Next we have trunks. Trunks are a combination of a gateway and a mediation server. We pair those together, the gateway connects us to the network, and the mediation does any transcoding of signaling or media that we need. A gateway or session border controller can be paired with more than one mediation server concurrently, hence the trunk configuration object. Next we have a route. A route is a way out of our network onto the PSTN network. A route has a regex number match to allow or deny us down that route and combines one or more trunks. Often we'll have multiple trunks and multiple gateways for resilience down a single route. Next we have a PSTN usage. You can think of a PSTN usage as a user policy or a scenario. So for example, local calling or national calling or international calling. A PSTN usage can combine multiple routes. Next we have a voice policy. This is actually assigned to a user, and any user only has one voice policy. The voice policy combines setting features the user is allowed to use or not use, and also one or more PSTN usages to route their calls. So for example, I might have a voice policy that only allows national calls, and in that voice policy I would only assign PSTN usages that allow national calls, which would flow through to routes that only allow national calls. Finally, there's the dial plan. The dial plan is about number normalization. So taking what the user inputs and quote-unquote normalizing it to E.164, which is the international numbering format standard. So for example, in the UK for a national call, London area code might be 0207, but what we actually want to do is have +44207. We don't want that leading zero because internationally +44 is the standard, and we want to have unique global numbering in our Skype for Business environment. And the dial plan's assigned to the user. Users have different dialing habits around the world. They might even have different dialing habits between offices. So each user is assigned a dial plan. Remember, the dial plan doesn't control what the user can dial, it's just normalizing the number. It's the voice policy, PSTN usage and routes that define what the user can and can't access. It might look complicated at first, but all these configuration objects give us lots of flexibility in our routing. For example, we want to have some users be able to dial one number and not another, and we also want calls to take maybe the least cost route. So if for example I'm a user in New York and I'm making a call to London, but actually we have a PSTN gateway in London, I might want to route that call preferably over the WAN to London and then out of the London gateway, rather than routing out of the New York gateway. It's voice policies, PSTN usages and routes that allow us that flexibility to do least cost routing. So let's see the configuration in action. Demo, basic enterprise voice setup. Here we are in Skype for Business Topology Builder, and this is where we define our gateways and our trunks. You can see at CCDD Bank we've got two gateways. and I've already created a trunk associated between the gateway and 2015 SEO1 and gateway 2 and 2015 SEO2. And here are our trunks. Remember, a gateway can have more than one trunk, so there might be a scenario where I have one gateway and I want to connect it to more than one mediation pool with resiliency. I could do that. But in this simple scenario, we've got one gateway associated with one mediation server, so 2 gateways and 2 trunks. The rest of the configuration is done in the control panel. If we go into the Skype for Business control panel and head to voice routing, you can see all our configuration objects along the top. So first we have trunk configuration. Even though we define our trunk in Topology Builder, there are some settings we can define in the control panel. I've already defined gateway 1, let's do gateway 2. So here is the trunk level. I can set some settings around the gateway. For example, does it support encryption? Does it support SIP refer? And various specific settings for the gateway. I can associate a PSTN usage here, but we're not going to do that just yet. And I can do calling number and called number translation rules. These are rules enacted on the trunk just before it goes to the PSTN. So for example, if my PSTN provider doesn't like plus on +44, I could strip it here on the trunk configuration. This ability sometimes overlaps with configuration you can do actually on the gateway too. So for now, I'm happy with my default settings for gateway 2. I'm going to click OK and commit. Every change in Skype for Business control panel has to be committed to apply. So you can now see I have my 2 trunks. Next, we're going to go to route. So at the moment, I've only got the default route installed. I'm going to create a new route for UK national calls. So I'm going to call it UK national, and the starting digits for UK national are +44. Now remember, our user might not dial +44, but we're going to use the dial plan to normalise to that format. So anything +44, I want to go through this route. Now I can associate trunks. I'm going to associate both trunks, so I've got some resilience. If one of my gateways has issues, the call will go down the other. Note that there's no order to these trunks, even though they've been put in as 1 and 2. Trunks associated with a route will round robin between the available trunks. It's not the case that gateway 1 will be used, then gateway 2 will be used in reserve. If we wanted a configuration where gateway 1 was the default and gateway 2 was the secondary, we could add more than one route and stack them up in a voice policy. Again, we have the option to define a usage here, but we're going to do that in the usage tab. So for now, we have a route for UK national that uses our 2 gateways. And again, commit. Next, we need a usage and a voice policy to tie that to the user. Interestingly, on the PSTN usage tab, you can't actually define a new usage. You can only define them at one of the route, trunk, or voice policy configuration stages. So we'll go to voice policy, and at the moment we have a global policy with no usages, so that won't go anywhere. And let's create a new user policy and call it UK national. Now you can see here the voice policy defines our calling features. So I might want to enable or disable call forwarding, team call, call transfer, those type of features. And here we have associate PSTN usages. And I want to create a new UK national usage. So here, UK national. And I know I have my route already defined, so I'm going to select my UK national route. So now I have my UK national route associated with my UK national voice policy. This UK national voice policy could have more than one usage, but for the moment we've got the one usage for UK national, which will round robin on the 2 gateways, so we're happy with that. And again, commit. And now we'll see in the usage tab, our UK national usage appears. So our UK national voice policy, last thing to configure is dial plan. We want a new user level dial plan. I'm going to call my dial plan UK national. I can set a description if I want, a dialing conferencing region. That defines which dialing conferencing numbers will be associated with my user when I schedule a meeting. An external access prefix, which we don't often use, but that's the ability to have 9 as an external access prefix. So the user can dial 9 and it'll automatically be removed because Skype for Business doesn't really need an external access prefix. And our normalization rules. So we want a new rule here called UK National. Now normally you want lots of rules to deal with all the different dialing habit scenario, but we'll just do the national number rule for now. So in the UK, if a number starts 0 and is exactly 11 digits, that's the national number. We want to remove the 0, so remove 1 digit. And we want to add +44 because that's the E164 standard for the UK. You'll see here Skype for Business generates a regex for us, so we don't need to generate it manually. But if you are good with regex, you can generate your own rules. So let's test our rule. Great, if we dial a national number 0207 and it's 11 digits, we're going to go to +44207. Okay to that. You need to take note of the order of the rules. They apply from top down. So at the moment we have a keep all rule and then a UK national rule. I'm going to put my UK national rule above the keep all digits rule. And we OK there and commit. A tip, if you search for Lync dial rule optimizer, a friend of mine, Ken Lasko, has created a website with all rules for nearly every country in the world. So you can choose your country, choose a few options and click generate rules, and it's going to give you a PowerShell script to run on Skype for Business that will install the relevant dialing rules. It's a handy tool. We also have the ability to test our voice routing right in the control panel. If I create a new test, so if I call my test UK National, and the number I'm going to dial is 0207 123 4567, and we're expecting our user to have the UK National dial plan. We're expecting that the user to have the UK National voice policy. The number we expect to come out is 44123457. We're expecting it to use the UK National usage, and we're expecting it to take the UK National route. So let's test. And yes, you can see on the right, all good, test passed. So if a user does have that dial plan and that voice policy, the number is going to get translated the way we want, and it is going to go down the UK National usage, and it's going to use the UK National route. So that's a handy tool to test your logic. We can save that rule if we like and use it again later. Sometimes it's handy to have a set of rules to test after you make changes to the environment, just to check you haven't broken anything. So in this example, we've set up a basic user and allowed them to make UK National calls, and they're round robining on 2 gateways. It can get a lot more complicated than that, but hopefully you now understand all the configuration objects and how they work. Lync Server 2013 Decommissioning Tips. At CCDD Bank, we've got our Skype for Business servers up and running, and the last thing CCDD are going to want to do is decommission those Lync Server 2013 servers. Here's a few tips for that process. First and most obvious, we need to move our users off, but also we need to move contact objects. So if we have any common area phones, Lync Rune systems, Exchange contact objects, response groups, or maybe other third-party integrations that use contact objects, those are usually tied to a pool and will need to be moved from the Lync 2013 pools to the Skype for Business pools. Remember, we've got to repoint that internal shared DNS to the Skype for Business servers. Our Meet, our Dial-In, our Lync Discover, those will all be pointed to Lync 2013 and they need to be moved over to Skype for Business. At CCDD we had no external connectivity before Skype for Business, but if our environment had had external connectivity before, again we'd need to point those common shared DNS records in the public DNS over to a reverse proxy pointing to our Skype for Business servers. We need to make sure all voice trunks are migrated across, so the gateway relationships are all tied to mediation on the Skype for Business pools. We obviously need to make sure our central management store is moved away from the Lync 2013 servers to the Skype for Business servers. And then finally, we're in a position to decommission our Lync Server 2013 servers. My recommendation is you stop the services on those servers and leave it for up to a week just to see that everything still works with them down. That way, if you do hit any issues, you can just restart them. Then once you're happy, you can delete them out of Topology and they'll be removed from the system. Module summary. In this module, we've seen how to set up pool pairing between our new Skype for Business servers. We've installed monitoring and archiving and the reports associated with monitoring. We set up basic enterprise voice and now understand how to set up voice for our users so they can make PSTN phone calls. And finally, we went through some Lync 2013 decommissioning tips, the last step in our move to Skype for Business. Planning an in-place upgrade at AAZZ Manufacturing. We're finished now with our CCDD bank scenario. We've done our side-by-side deployment, and now we're moving on to an in-place upgrade. In this module, we're going to go through AAZZ Bank's goals and requirements. We're going to take a look at their current topology. We're going to go through design considerations for moving to Skype for Business. We're then going to lay out their Skype for Business design. And finally, we're going to come up with a deployment plan to get us from the current environment to that Skype for Business design. So let's meet AAZZ Manufacturing. AAZZ have 10,000 users, so they're slightly bigger than CCDD Bank. They have an existing resilient Lync 2013 Enterprise Edition deployment, so we're going to be looking at a larger deployment with more servers. They're using Enterprise Voice. They want to move to Skype for Business as soon as possible. And they have limited virtual machine capacity in their environment. Well, those two requirements are interesting. They want to move as soon as possible, and they've got limited virtual machine capacity, which means that deploying a whole Skype for Business Enterprise Edition deployment alongside the existing deployment is going to take more than the virtual machine capacity they've got. And obviously it's going to take a lot more time than doing an in-place upgrade. Let's take a look at their current topology. We see it's much more expansive than CCDD Bank. They have 2 gateways for resilience, but rather than 2 standard edition pools, they have 2 enterprise edition pools. And there's 3 front-end servers in each of those pools. We can see they've got single SQL backends, so no mirroring on the back end. Clearly they're just relying on the pools for resiliency. And the back end on the left is also hosting the monitoring and archiving databases. There are edge servers, 1 for each environment. There's an Office Web App server and Exchange Unified Messaging. So a pretty decent sized environment. Let's think about some design considerations. Again, in this case, we're going to lean to in-place upgrade. There's quite a few servers in play. We don't have the hardware or virtual capacity to build a whole another environment, and the customer wants to move ASAP. It's a lot quicker to do an in-place upgrade than it is to design out and deploy a whole new infrastructure. For the in-place upgrade, we only need 1 new server, and that's the server to install the first Skype for Business server management tools on. From there on out, we can in-place upgrade the existing servers. So the 1 new server requirement meets our lack of virtual capacity quite nicely. There are going to be multiple phases to the deployment. So we can deploy 1 pool and then test and then deploy the other. Unlike our finance scenario, AAZZ Manufacturing are a little more confident and a little more agile in terms of their process. They're happy to move all their users from pool 1 to pool 2, upgrade pool 1, move some users back for basic testing, and then move all the users back, and then follow the same process for pool 2. The reward for them of being able to move quicker and use less hardware definitely outweighs the risk of any issue with an in-place upgrade. So they're happy with that approach. They have a pool pair, and we don't unpair the pools for the in-place upgrade. So while it is supported to have the pools paired during the migration, you're not technically supported for a pool pair failover during the migration. So we need to ensure we have minimal time where the two pools are with different versions. Microsoft don't specify that minimal amount of time. It's got to be decided on a customer by customer basis. But ideally we're talking days, not weeks. Finally, we're following the standard inside-out methodology. So we upgrade our pools first, then our auxiliary roles like standalone mediation servers, edge servers, directors, etc. That's the process we'll follow at AAZZ. Let's take a look at our planned topology. It shouldn't come as a surprise really. We're doing an in-place upgrade. So we're going to end up with exactly the same topology as we've got today, but just with Skype for Business bits on each of the Skype for Business servers. So we're still going to have our three front-end pools, we're still going to have our same back-end databases and same edge servers. We'll continue to leverage the existing Office web app server and Exchange Unified Messaging, and we'll be continuing to leverage our existing gateways. And this is the beauty of in place. We haven't had to design a whole new environment, we haven't had to think about firewall rules or server requirements. We were already on Lync 2013 across the board. The hardware requirements between 2013 and Skype for Business haven't really changed, so we're ready to go to upgrade in place. Note on this diagram you don't see the additional management server. As part of the deployment we're going to have to deploy a management server just to bootstrap off the process. We can't install the Skype for Business management tools which allow us to do the initial topology upgrade on a Skype for Business server, so we need another server to kick that process off. We're not showing it on Topology because it's a temporary VM. We're going to deploy it, kick our process off, and from then on we'll manage our Skype for Business from one of our front-end servers. So it's just a transient server we need temporarily. What does our deployment plan look like for an in-place upgrade? Well, first we're going to install our Skype for Business management tools on that new management server we talked about. Once we have our management tools in play, we're in a position to upgrade the Skype for Business server in the topology and publish the topology. It's recommended you upgrade your central management store last. So we're going to take the opportunity to demo how we fail that central management store over. Then we're going to in-place upgrade our enterprise pools. We're going to in-place upgrade our edge servers. And finally, we're going to look at some testing we can do in PowerShell after we've done the upgrade. Summary. We've gone through the AAZZ manufacturing scenario, and we've explained why they're right for an in-place upgrade. We've gone through the various in-place upgrade considerations and topology design, and we've gone through a deployment plan of how we're going to do the in-place upgrade. In the next module, we'll run through that upgrade process. In-place upgrade from Lync Server to Skype for Business server. In this module, we're going to jump onto AAZZ manufacturing, and we're going to do an in-place upgrade from their Lync 2013 Enterprise Edition to Skype for Business. After we've done the pools, following the inside-out methodology, we're then going to do an in-place upgrade for the Edge server. And finally, we're going to look at doing a bit of testing with PowerShell post-deployment. Skype for Business in-place upgrade steps. The in-place upgrade follows a number of steps. First, we're going to line up all our prerequisites. Then we're going to move users off the pool we want to test. Then we're going to move our centralized management server. It's recommended you do the centralized management server last, and we're going to take this opportunity to demo how to move it. Then we're going to do our topology update and publish. We'll deploy our server bits, and we'll start the services and test the sign-in. Skype for Business 2015 in-place upgrade demo. Prerequisites, move users, move central management store, and topology update and publish. Here we are on AAZZ's topology. As we saw in the previous module, they have two enterprise pools, Pool 01 and Pool 02, and two edge servers, Edge 01 and Edge 02. They also have monitoring and archiving deployed. At the moment, as you can see, it's all Lync Server 2013. There's no Skype for Business in the environment. We're now going to take Pool 01 and upgrade it to Skype for Business with an in-place upgrade. First off, we have to check our prerequisites are all in place. We want to ensure the pool is patched to current. Easiest way to do that is PowerShell. For each front-end server, we can do a get WMI to check the Lync patch levels. That all looks good. There's no patch for the reach fonts and everything else is patched up to current. So we're good to go on the patching levels. Obviously we'd want to check this on all 3 FEs, but I know they're all up to date. Next we want to check the local SQL Express is at least up to SP1. Easiest way to do that is head into Control Panel, Program Features and Installed Updates. And I can see here that I have Microsoft SQL Server 2012 SP2. So SP2 is obviously above SP1, so we're good to go on that front. Finally, we discussed earlier the hotfixes. There's different hotfixes for each OS. Here we're on Server 2012 R2, so it's KB 2982006. And if I run that, I can see it's already installed on this computer. So my Lync's patched, my SQL is up to date, and I have my key hotfix. And I've checked those over all 3 FEs, so I know I'm good to go on all of my FEs. Next up, we want to move our users. We can do this in PowerShell or in the control panel. If we go to users in the control panel and find, we can see here I've got users on pool 1 and pool 2. During an upgrade, the pool will be offline. We can't upgrade FE by FE, the whole pool has to go down. And we want our users on pool 1 to continue having service. So we're going to move these users to pool 2. If I press shift and down to select pool 1 users, and action, and move selected users, and I'm going to move them to pool 2. Again, we don't want to force the move, we just want to do a regular move, and we don't want to do any kind of pool pair failover. Our pools are paired, but we want to actually move the users, not just fail them over. If you're dealing with a lot of users, PowerShell is better, and you can export a list of your users ready to go so that when you move them back, you know who you've got to move back. Also bear in mind the users are enterprise voice, so they're going to need a route both inbound and outbound for their voice calls during the patching process. These users have routes and mediation paths in and out of pool 2 as well as pool 1 for resiliency, so their phone calls will be able to carry on. So I now have all my users on pool 2 and no users on pool 1, so we're good to go from a user point of view. Next up is the central management store. If I do get CS management connection, you can see at the moment the central management store is on pool 01. Let's check our CMS replication is all okay. Get CS management store replication status. Yep, we can see it's replicating around all the pools. Now, because at AAZZ manu the 2 pools are already pool paired, the central management store is already being replicated to pool 02. So we just need to invoke a failover of a central management store. Note, we're not doing a pool level failover and not failing over any users, we're just failing over the central management store for the duration of the upgrade. To do that, we do invoke CS management server failover, and the current state is CMS is on pool 01 and we wanted to move to pool 02, so we're going to say yes. And we've completed and we've got a warning, that's okay. Let's check our replication status. It can sometimes take a minute. There we go, we're all replicating again, which is good. And if we do get CS management connection, we can see we're now on pool 02 SQL 01. So all good, our central management store is now running from pool 02, which means we're ready to proceed with the upgrade. Next, we want to do our topology update, and for that we obviously need our new management server. We've jumped over to our brand new domain join management server. We can't install the Skype for Business management tools on an existing Lync 2013 server, so we need at least one management server to kick the process off from. We're not actually going to install Skype for Business on this server, just the management tools. So we go to the Skype for Business ISO, which I have on a network share, and we're going to run setup. This will install the core components, and we're going to install the administration tools. We don't need to check. You'll notice the Skype for Business deployment wizard knows AD is already prepped. We want to install the admin tools. Okay, so admin tools installed. Now if we go to the Skype for Business topology builder, we're going to download the topology. So we now have AAZZ Manus topology downloaded into the Skype for Business topology builder. So here's our existing pools. And you'll notice at the moment we've got nothing in the Skype for Business tree. So let's take pool 01, right click, and we want to upgrade to Skype for Business server. And it's confirming, are we sure we want to do that? Yes, we do. You'll notice it's dropped out of the 2013 tree and it's dropped into the Skype for Business tree. And that's all we need to do in topology. All that's doing behind the scenes is changing the version of the pool from Lync to Skype for Business. So now we're going to publish that topology. It's noting that there'll be some SQL changes on the back end of pool 01, which we'd expect. At this point, we're publishing our first Skype for Business topology. So from here on in, the topology XML is Skype for Business enabled, and we can only use Skype for Business admin tools to manage the topology. You might notice, since our backend pool has monitoring and archiving deployed, the Skype for Business topology builder is automatically upgrading the schema on those to the latest version. That version is compatible with both Lync 2013 as long as it's patched CE5 and above, and Skype for Business. So you need to make sure all your pools are patched to current before doing this process, or you'll have problems with monitoring and archiving. Okay, looks good. We have got one warning, so let's check that. And we see a warning about the file share saying it's version 6 and it's expecting version 7. Version 6 is Lync 2013, it's looking for Skype for Business. But we haven't upgraded that pool yet, so we can ignore that warning. So now our topology is published, the topology XML says that that pool should be a Skype for Business pool. But nothing's going to change on that pool just yet. First thing we need to do is make sure that topology XML is replicated around the environment. So we'll check our replication status. And we're all good, that's replicated around. That's an important step. If we go any further without checking that's replicated, we could stop our front-end pool before it's got the new XML. If it hasn't got the new XML, it's not going to upgrade successfully, because it will still be identified as a Lync pool in the topology XML. So we're now ready to go and install our bits. Back on pool 01, we're now ready to upgrade the bits. First thing we want to do is stop the Lync services running. We do that with disable cscomputer-scorch. Scorch sounds extreme, but all it's doing is stopping the Lync services and setting them to disabled. This is preferable to just stopping them, because if the computer reboots or a third-party management tool tries to restart the mid-upgrade process, it won't be able to. We need to perform this step on each of the FEs to stop the entire pool. Okay, that's finished, and we can check that. If we go into services, and we check the Lync services, they're not running and they're disabled. In the background, I've done that for FEO2 and FEO3. So now our pool 01 is completely down. Next up, we can jump into the Skype for Business ISO and upgrade the bits. Skype for Business in-place upgrade, part 2. Server deployment, starting services, and moving users back and testing. From the ISO, we run setup. We don't want to check for updates this time. And you'll notice that the setup's automatically detected that we've got an existing deployment and we're doing an in-place upgrade. So straight off, it's doing various prereq checks. It's then going to uninstall Lync and install the Skype for Business bits. This can take some time, but we'll speed this up on the video. Okay, so the upgrade tool is all finished and all green ticks, which is what we like to see. I've sped it up in the video, but it took about an hour and 20 in the lab. Now the lab's not really to production hardware spec, but be aware it can take quite a while. So we hit OK, and we've got upgrade completed successfully. Now in the background, I've done FEO2 and FEO3, and they were both successful as well. So now all 3 FEs are successful. And I'm being told here to start the front end pool, connect to one of the servers and run start CS pool. So that's what we're going to do. We can OK out of this and we'll launch a fresh PowerShell instance. And we're going to use the new to Skype for Business start CS pool commandlet. It's pool 01 we've just upgraded. Yes, all the pools have Skype for Business or later. This commandlet's awesome. So previously in Lync 2013, when you had to start a pool, you had to start all the services at the same time across all the FEs. So you tend to bring up remote desktop, have start CS Windows services ready on all the FEs, and then run around, press them really quickly, and then you'd wait for it to start. Now we have this commandlet that goes off into Topology, reads all the FEs, goes and remote starts them, and updates you as it goes. So we'll give this a few minutes to start our pool services. It's not unusual for this to take a little while. And that took about 5 minutes. I've sped it up in the video. It can take a lot longer depending on how many FEs you've got and how many users you've got, because Windows Fabric has more to sort out with the routing groups. But you can see we get updates all the way through, which is really nice. And at the end we get a nice running output status. Let's just check that in services. So we're on that same pool 01 FE01, and now we have all Skype for Business services up and running. All in place, no reboots, pretty impressive. And if we just go to the control panel, and we'll connect to our same pool, pool 01. We can now see we're on Skype for Business, which is great. One more check, let's just make sure everything's replicating. Back to PowerShell. Yep, Topology is replicating around the environment. So good news, looks like we've had a successful upgrade. Let's try moving a user back and signing them in. We'll take John and we'll just move him. Again, no force. You'll notice now it's pool 01 is Skype for Business Server 2015. And he's moved over successfully. Let's try signing him in. In the lab, I've installed Office on the server just to test. So here we go. And success, we're signed in. So we've got a warning there, but that's just no audio device because we're on a server. So let's double check we're connected to our Skype for Business pool. If we go into the tray on the Skype for Business clients icon, do Control and right click, go to configuration information, you can see yes, we're on pool 01. And looks good, success. So after testing, we could move all our users away from the Lync 2013 pool onto this pool and do the same in place upgrade on the 2013 pool. And it's all been with minimal interruption to users and no need to change DNS or certificates or spin up new servers. A really easy process. Edge server, in place upgrade. Since our last AAZZ manufacturing demo where we in place upgraded pool 01, I've gone ahead and done the same process and in place upgraded pool 02. On pool 02, since it was the last pool in our topology, we left the CMS in place on pool 02 and in place upgraded there. And now if we wanted to, we could move the CMS back to pool 01. But either way, our two enterprise pools, as you can see, are now under Skype for Business Server 2015 and all looks good. However, if we go into the Lync 2013 node, our edge pools are still in place under Lync 2013. This is the correct process. We want to go inside out, inside being the Skype for Business pools first and outside being other roles such as edge. But now we're ready to upgrade our edge servers. So how does that work? Well, it should be a familiar process. So let's go to Edge 01 and we can see it's all configured with 3 IP addresses, its certs are all lined up, etc. We're going to right click and upgrade to Skype for Business. It's giving us the warning, are we sure we want to upgrade? Yes, we are. And we'll see now our edge pool appears here. Any association in Topology Builder shouldn't have changed, so we should still be lined up to pool 01. And indeed we are. Edge server pool is Edge 01. So we're ready to publish our topology and let it replicate. We publish. All looks good. Let's have a look at our next actions. And as we expect, it's telling us we now have to run the in-place upgrade on our edge server. Again, before we do an in-place upgrade, we want to make sure the central management store is replicated. So we do get CS management store replication status. We can see it's replicated. In particular, it's replicated to Edge 01. If we didn't wait for that replication, there's a risk we stop services on Edge 01 before it's replicated and the in-place upgrade won't work. But we're looking good, so let's jump onto Edge 01. Okay, so we're now on Edge 01. We know the central management store has replicated, so there's a local copy here. So we're ready to jump to the Skype for Business ISO. And let's run the setup. Again, the prereqs are installed automatically. We won't check for updates because we know there aren't any at the moment. And we'll accept our terms and conditions. And just like the front end pools, the Skype for Business topology has realised we're due an in-place upgrade and is going ahead and stopping services, disabling them, uninstalling roles, and installing the new Skype for Business roles. We'll speed this up a bit in the video. And looks like we're all done and all green. Let's just check the services. And we can see, yes, we now have Skype for Business services instead of Lync services. So let's start those. Since we're a single server pool, we can just do a start CS Windows Services. And let's check the services. Okay, our fabric hasn't started. Let's just start that manually. Sometimes you'll find services won't start first time, but starting them manually is no problem. And looks like that started nicely. We can just verify that again in PowerShell. Okay, we have all our services running, that looks good. Now we just want to check that the edge is still replicating correctly. You can't do that from the edge server because it's not domain joined, so we'll jump back over to the FE. Right, we're back on a front end server, so we'll head into PowerShell and we'll check our replication again. And all looks good, Edge A1 is replicating and up to date. So that's our edge server in place upgraded, and we now want to do some tests around federation and remote access just to make sure everything's working. Testing a Skype for Business deployment with PowerShell. At AAZZ Manufacturing, we've now done all our in-place upgrades, but how do we test Skype for Business? Obviously you need to do the basics, like check through event logs and check services are running. And you want to do what most people would call functional testing, so signing users in and testing the experience. But the Skype for Business team also give us some really useful PowerShell commandlets to test systems. Let's take a look. If we do get command and then use Skype for Business module and do verb test. Each PowerShell commandlet is a verb and a noun. And so we've just asked to look at all the test commandlets in the Skype for Business module. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of them. Now some of these are around testing topology state or testing dial plans, so we don't want all of them, but there are quite a few that are good just to test that the system's running from a user point of view. You can run them manually, but that takes quite a lot of time. What I've done is taken 11 key tests and put them into a single script, just to make it easier for me to test the environment after doing any patching or upgrades. I use this script after any change, cumulative update, upgrade, etc. And the script's been included for you in the resources in this Pluralsight course. So let's run the script and see what we get. If we go into PowerShell, and the script's name is run SFB synthetic tests. The script's going to ask us for a pools test. Each of the tests is aimed at a pool, so things like the AVMCU will be tested on that pool. Then it's asking us for a user. Most of the tests require either 1 or 2 users. The system's really signing in as those users and testing from that user's point of view. So bear in mind it's going to take into account things like their dial plan and their policies. And password, and a second user, and a password. You can see my ultra secure passwords in my lab here. Now what the script's doing is taking those user accounts and invoking the tests. So you see we have a user registration test, then we're testing presence, then we're testing an instant message between users, then peer-to-peer audio video, then peer-to-peer PSTN calling, then a group instant message. So that's instant messaging involving the MCU. And we're finished. And we get a nice summary saying if we've got a success or a fail and the details of that test. This is not a replacement for user functional testing, but it is really powerful to give us a quick overview of how the environment's behaving, and a good indication that our patch or upgrade or system change has been successful and not impacted the user experience. I really encourage you to run a script like this after you do an install or upgrade. It gives you a good baseline to know the core functionality is at least working. Module summary. In this module, we've seen the in-place upgrade at AAZZ Manufacturing from Lync Server 2013 Enterprise Edition to Skype for Business. And we've seen just how quick and easy that really is. We also saw the Edge server in-place upgrade. Again, just a right-click and deploy, really, dead easy. And finally, we saw some testing with the PowerShell commandlets. That's a really useful way to test your system post-upgrade, and also valuable after patch cycles. And that brings us to the end of this Pluralsight course. I hope you've really enjoyed learning a bit about Skype for Business, doing a side-by-side migration and an in-place upgrade. I hope it's been useful and would love to hear any feedback. Thanks for watching. Hi, this is Tom Arbuthnot and welcome to this Pluralsight course, Skype for Business Server 2015, What's New, Install and Upgrade. A little about this course. This course is centered around Skype for Business Server 2015, which is the new rebranded release of Lync Server 2013. And in this course we're going to take you through what's new in Skype for Business Server 2015. We're going to take you through some of the topologies and roles so that you can understand all your options in designing your Skype for Business infrastructure. We're going to go through two customer scenarios. The first scenario is a bank who have existing Lync Server 2013 servers but want to do a new side-by-side Skype for Business server install. So that's our new install scenario. And the second is a manufacturing company who have an existing Lync Server 2013 deployment and want to take advantage of the new ability to do an in-place upgrade from Lync Server to Skype for Business Server. What are we covering in this module? Quickly, we're going to go through who I am and why I think you should listen to me in terms of Skype for Business Server. Then we're going to go through what is Skype for Business. To understand what you're going to deploy, you have to understand what the product is. Then we're going to quickly go through understanding the rebrand from Lync to Skype for Business. And finally, we're going to go through understanding the differences between Skype for Business Online, which is an Office 365 offering, and Skype for Business Server. So, a little about me. I'm based in London in the United Kingdom, but I work with customers all over the world. I'm a Microsoft Skype for Business MVP. I'm also a Microsoft Certified Master in Lync. I co-run the Microsoft London UC user group, and I'm a full-time Skype for Business UC architect. So this is what I do all day, every day for small to large customers all around the world. So, what is Skype for Business? You'll hear it described in lots of different ways, but I think this sums it up nicely. Skype for Business simplifies and unifies the different tools people use to communicate at work, transforming business communications. Now, it might be a little bit marketing-y for your taste, but that's really what Skype for Business is. To dig down a little bit, Skype for Business is a unified communications product or platform. So it combines different types of communications into one product. So that includes instant messaging, so sending text messages from one another. Telephony, so that's actually having a PSTN phone number and being able to make and receive phone calls. And that could be on a software client, on a mobile, or it could be on an IP phone. Also audio conferencing, so the ability to have multiple people on an audio conference, either again on PSTN or on VoIP on software. Video conferencing and web conferencing, and that includes editing, desktop sharing, collaboration. So lots of different functionalities, and in many businesses those might be different products for each one of those boxes. But Skype for Business brings those together seamlessly on a single platform. Really, the easiest way to understand Skype for Business is to see a demo. So let's jump into what the user experience is like. Here we are on the Skype for Business Windows client. And this is me signed into Skype for Business. So the first thing you'll see is what we refer to as a buddy list. So here I have groups of people who I communicate with. They can either be distribution lists, which is denoted by these figures here, or contact lists I've made myself just locally for me. If I expand one of these out, you can see I have a list of contacts with photos and a little detail about whether the person is away or available, and in my case, a note. So a key concept to understand with Skype for Business is the idea of presence. The system tells you whether a person is available, busy, decided to put themselves on Do Not Disturb, or some form of away. And you can set this yourself, but also the system just drives it for you. So Skype for Business knows if I haven't been at my machine for a while, I'm probably away. Or it knows if I'm in a meeting to set me to busy as in a meeting. Equally, I can override this and say, actually, I just don't want to be disturbed. And if I hit Do Not Disturb, now nobody can contact me unless I explicitly let them. Buddy lists can be sorted into groups, which you can customize yourself. You can sort them by relationship, and we can see who's new and recently added me. So from my buddy list, I can see all my contacts, and I can instant message, voice call, video call, see a contact card, or have some additional options here, including tag for status change, which allows me to monitor when the person next comes online. Next is persistent chat. So these are chat rooms that, as the name suggests, persist over time. So whereas an instant message I send to somebody is fairly transient, there is a conversation history record, but when it's gone, it's gone. A chat room is something that persists over time, and people can come and leave and see the full history of the chat. So if I send a message here, that message stays, and as people drop in and out of the room, they can see the history of the message, including links and pictures pasted into the chat room. Next tab is my conversation history. So this history is of my voice and video calls, my instant messaging, all my communications. That conversation history is actually stored in Exchange, and the Skype Business client is talking to Exchange to retrieve that history. Next up, we have telephony. So as you can see here, I have a dial pad and I can make regular PSTN calls. I can also search for people by name rather than searching by their phone number, and click to call here. And as you may have noticed, I also have my voicemail here. So here's a recent voicemail left for me, and I can play it back. Again, the voicemail lives in Exchange, it's just being surfaced through the Skype for Business client. Finally, I have a little meetings tab which shows my meetings for the day, and any Skype for Business meetings are shown in blue. So as well as being in my Outlook calendar, which is what this is retrieving, I can actually click and join a Skype for Business meeting straight from here without even having to go into Outlook. And finally, the cog at the far right is options, various options around my setup, my audio, my video, my recording, and my meetings. There are two ways that I can collaborate. I can either pick somebody and start an instant message, or I may want to start a meeting, say a meet now, and now we're in a meeting. Obviously I'm the only person in the meeting, but here you can see I have my video options. There's my video, I have my audio options, and I have various abilities to share. So I can present my desktop, present individual programs, PowerPoint, drop attachments into the conversation, even whiteboards, polls, and question and answer sessions. So lots of ways to collaborate, and I can bring people into this meeting from my internal company or from other companies that run Skype for Business or Lync, or even external joiners with no particular Skype for Business or Lync account, just through a web browser. Lots of options, as well as of course PSTN dial-in for the traditional conferencing. As well as doing ad hoc meetings, I can actually do a scheduled meeting. So here we are in Outlook, and you'll notice I have a new Skype meeting button. If I click that, what you see here is an invite I can send out to anybody through Outlook calendar appointments, and it has a join link for the Skype for Business meeting and PSTN dial-in numbers. So that's a brief tour of the Windows client. There's also clients for Mac, Windows Phone, Android, iOS, so iPads and iPhones, and there's even various IP phone-based handsets for phones on desks and room-based video systems. So lots of different options for lots of different platforms, but you see we're bringing all the functionality from instant messaging, presence, voice, video, conferencing and collaboration all into one client for the user. So I can jump straight from an instant message to a video call to desktop sharing, and that can be internal of my business or external, and the external people can either be running Skype for Business or just joining as an anonymous guest, even through a web browser. Some of you watching may have heard of Lync before. So Lync is the previous brand to Skype for Business, and there's actually been a number of rebranding to this platform. So originally it was Office Communications Server, OCS, then it moved to Lync, and now most recently after Microsoft purchased Skype, they've gone with Skype for Business. Skype for Business is essentially built on Lync, so anything you knew about Lync or Lync Server or using Lync previously, it still applies. It's a proven platform, it's a billion-dollar business for Microsoft, and people use it for voice, video and unified communications all over the world. So all the good stuff about Lync is still there. This is a rebrand primarily. So everything you knew about Lync previously still applies. It's important to be clear, this is not what we call Skype Consumer. So this is not the consumer offering. The branding is the same, the experience is very similar, but they are two distinct products. They can even talk to each other, so a Skype for Business user can talk to a Skype consumer user and vice versa, but they remain distinct platforms. And Skype for Business is really what you need if you want enterprise grade security and compliance and policies and archiving, all the enterprisey type features you expect. And Skype Consumer is obviously your free option for consumers to just grab and do voice and video. So different options for different requirements, but Skype for Business is really the high-end offering in terms of enterprise, not the standard consumer product. Why the change? Well, Skype is a really well-known brand throughout the world. Whenever I was deploying Lync, when I was explaining it to users, I would say, what do I do? Well, it's Skype for enterprises or Skype for Business. And people would instantly go, oh, okay, so voice, video, conferencing, PCs, I get that. Now it's called Skype for Business. We have this lesser step of explaining what options you have in terms of features and functionality, and hopefully users instantly understand Skype, okay, I can do video, okay, I can do conferencing. And this will really drive up adoption and improve user experience, I think. Skype for Business Server versus online or Office 365. As with everything Microsoft, they are driving towards Office 365 in the cloud, and it's no exception on Skype for Business. There are two deployment models. You can go the Office 365 route, have Microsoft host it all, essentially you turn it on with a credit card and away you go. Or you can go with the more traditional servers on-prem or servers hosted by a third-party provider, managed service provider. There are some functional differences between the two models. Currently, the Office 365 or Skype for Business Online version is a little bit more limited than the server version. This is changing almost as we speak. So previously there was no PSTN telephony or ability to have a phone number in Office 365, and there was no quality of service and no advanced voice features. Now in the US, the PSTN telephony is going into preview, and there will be some options there. But essentially, the server product has additional abilities such as integrating with third-party platforms, a fuller set of APIs for things like compliance and recording, switchboards, attendant consoles. So third-party products that integrate tightly with Skype for Business. And if you want quality of service or you want to guarantee your telephony experience, at the moment, Skype for Business Server is the right one to go for. So for this course, since we're talking more enterprise and telephony type deployments, we're going to be looking mainly at Skype for Business Server. But don't forget that hybrid is an option. So in some scenarios, you may have some users on Skype for Business on server and some users on Skype for Business on Office 365. And the two can work together seamlessly with the same namespace. So lots of good options for deployment. What have we covered in this module? Well, we've gone through that Skype for Business Server is a unified communication solution, and hopefully you understand some of the features and functionality available to your users should you deploy it. It's a rebrand from Lync, so anything you do know about Lync or any previous courses you've done on Lync, largely a lot of that information will carry forward. And there are server options and cloud deployment options, and in this course we're mainly going to be talking about Skype for Business Server. Hi, this is Tom Arbuthnot, and this is What's New in Skype for Business Server 2015. What are we covering in this module? We're going to go over all the key new features of Skype for Business Server 2015, and we're also going to go over some new key features for Skype for Business Online. Even though this is a server-focused course, there are some new features in Skype for Business Online which are reducing the gap between server features that were only available on-prem and features now available in the cloud. And these are important to understand as a lot of Skype for Business server deployments will actually be hybrid and leverage some of these new cloud functionalities. Skype branding. This is clearly one of the most visual impacts. The clients have all been rebranded to have this Skype consumer look and feel while still being Skype for Business under the covers. This is more of a client impact than it is a server impact, but as you can see from the picture on the left, the server is rebranded as well. So the control panel is all Skype for Business, and any of the user-facing web pages are Skype for Business, so the dial-in page, the meet page, for example. You'll be pleased to know that under the covers, not a lot on the server has changed. So for example, the topology builder is pretty much the same. All the PowerShell commandlets are the same. So anything you understand about Lync Server 2013 in terms of administration really carries over. But the branding is an impact and it's worth understanding. Management and patching improvements. Obviously, it's a new version of the product and there's been a lot of general performance improvement and reliability improvement work being done. But in particular, there's been a real focus on management and patching. The centralized logging service, which is the service that allows you to grab logs across multiple front-end servers in a pool, has been improved in that it can now all be managed via PowerShell. So previously you had to command line drive an executable, but now it's all first-party PowerShell. And that makes grabbing logs on a troubleshooting issue much easier, as now you can run PowerShell to start the logs, stop the logs, and collect the logs. Front-end pool cold start. This is a nice little addition. If you're running big pools, say you have 6, 7, 8 front-end servers in a pool, in the 2013 model, if you wanted to start that pool, because of Windows Fabric, you have to start all the servers at the same time, or as many as you can at the same time, so they can establish quorum and start the services. But the only way to do that in 2013 really was to have all the servers up on remote desktop and quickly run from one to the other doing start-cs service or manually starting the services. In Skype for Business, we have a nice dedicated commandlet which will start a pool rather than a server. So you can point it at a whole pool, say start this pool, and it will go around all the servers, starting all the services. Patching improvements. Patching is quite an extensive process in Lync Server 2013. In Skype for Business, the number of steps has been reduced, and we now have start CS computer and stop CS computer commandlets to start and stop individual FEs during the patching process. Hybrid management in the control panel. This is another nice addition. Increasingly, hybrid is becoming common. That's the scenario where you run some users in Office 365 and some users on-prem on the server. Previously, this was all driven through PowerShell, but now hybrid management has been baked into the control panel. So in the control panel now, you can enable users for Skype for Business Server or for Skype for Business Online. You can move users from on-prem to online or back, and you can see your cloud users and your Office 365 users on one pane of glass. SQL Always On support. In Lync 2010, we supported clustering as our high availability for SQL. In Lync 2013, we added mirroring. So now we had clustering and mirroring. And that was just around the time, funnily enough, that SQL Always On was coming into play. And unfortunately, we didn't support that in the Lync 2013 timeframe. But now with Skype for Business, we support SQL Always On as an availability technology for the SQL backend for some of the Lync services. So now you have the choice of clustering, mirroring, or SQL Always On. And we'll talk about those further during the topology discussions.